can a bank help the world realize its dreams? At Emirates NBD, we empower people, companies, economies, countries. Proudly born in the UAE, leading the region, expanding globally. Investing, innovating, delivering, giving back, paying forward, creating opportunities to prosper. Emirates NBD.
From here, possibilities are everywhere. From taking first steps here, to beginning your own wealth journey here. From backing global trade ambitions here, to delivering on that promise here. That's why we're here, in the world's most dynamic markets. A bank that connects potential to possibilities. So, where will you go from here?
Welcome everyone. A very warm welcome to you all to the IGF WomenIN Forum. Inspiring to aspire. My name is Laura Buckwell, and it's a great pleasure to be your host for this segment of the show, a very important segment of the show, might I add, here at the wonderful Taj Exotica, The Palm. Well, it's the second day of the IGF Forum UA, and so far we've had a forum on entering into the new era, that was yesterday, disruptors in the desert last night, I hear, and a founders and funders forum today. And we're also hosting the IGF studio, where I've just come out from actually, just next door, and that's ongoing as well over the next couple of days. However, now, ladies and gentlemen, we turn our attention now to women. And over the next couple of hours, we're going to be meeting entrepreneurs, business leaders, and senior government officials who are really driving essential positive change and answering that age-old question, can women have it all? Well, just to let you know, we are, of course, broadcasting live through all of our media partners. And also, to join the conversation, please do use our hashtag, which is IGFUAE. Now, as we know, India Global Forum is where India meets the world and where the world meets India. Right, something to think about though, ladies and gentlemen, just before we get started. Did you know that if women participated in the economy identically to men, it would add up to 28 trillion US dollars, or 26% of annual GDP by 2025. That's compared with a business as usual scenario. And this economic potential is highest in developing countries. That's according to KPMG. When looking across to India, according to McKinsey Global, the country could potentially add 700 billion US dollars to global GDP by increasing women's participation in the workforce. Some shocking figures there, ladies and gentlemen, and a lot to think about as well. One thing is certain is that there is definitely still an uneven playing field as well. And that's why we're here, ladies and gentlemen, to dissect some of the main issues still holding women back and how we can bridge the gap with our incredible lineup of speakers. Well, on a more positive note, we start the WomenIN Forum with a conversation on the changing role of women in Indian cinema. Over the last few decades, there has been a significant transformation in the way that women are portrayed through film as a reflection of changes in social structure. And who better to tell her story than a Bollywood actress who's here with us here today? From action and thrillers to drama and comedy, our next guest has done it all. It's a great pleasure, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome on stage as our first guest. Please do give a very warm welcome to Sanya Malhotra. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much.
So wonderful to have you in the forum today. So we cannot thank you for taking time out of your very busy schedule, I'm sure. So thank you.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Brilliant.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. What a great crowd we've got here as well. Thank you to everyone for coming out. A really nice mix of men and women, actually, which is great. Really good. Right, let's get started. So let's start with your journey as a Bollywood actress. So how did you get started? And also, how was it sort of navigating Bollywood as a woman?
I started my Bollywood journey, this is 7 years back, with my debut in Dangal, where I portrayed the character of Babita Kumari. I'm sure most of you have seen the film. I hope you all have seen the film. If not, it's available on Netflix. Please do watch it. So that was my debut, which is 7 years back. And since then, I've been navigating in this industry by choosing some diverse roles. And I've also had a good fortune to have worked with some exceptionally talented filmmakers. I have done films like, and characters like in Paglet and Pataka, where women in India and all parts of India can see themselves in those characters. And I just feel very honored to have gotten those opportunities. As a woman in Bollywood, I think it's essential for me to be selective, to look for projects which align with my political and personal and artistic levels. So I think I've been very lucky and fortunate to have worked in some really good projects.
And it's important to be authentic and not to sell out, you know, for anyone, of course. So some of your most recent films, I've been reading, I had a little Google, are Mrs. And that's the life of a married girl who finds her identity through navigating her life in the kitchen. And then we go all the way across to an action thriller, Jawan. And so we've got two very different movies putting women in two very different lights, but putting and maintaining empowerment at the heart of it. So how do you choose the characters and the people that you want to portray? How and why is that important to you?
So Mrs. is not out yet. We are doing a round of international film festivals. It got premiered at Tallinn Black Film Festival in Estonia in a few weeks back. And Jawan, I'm sure you all have seen it because it stars the biggest superstar in Bollywood, which is Shah Rukh Khan, and I feel very honored to have worked with him.
Wow.
Mrs. and Jawan indeed represent two very different facets of women's experience. Mrs. focuses on finding the independence and identity within the domestic sphere, and Jawan focuses on finding empowerment through like action-oriented roles. These two are very different films and very beautifully captures the diversity and emotions of women. And I think as an actor, I make sure that I'm choosing characters which are breaking and challenging the usual stereotypes. And these are the films that these two are beautiful, and it actually captures how diverse women are and how the cinema is changing and how people are writing more different characters for us as actresses.
Also, you know, contemporary films now very much portray women as more confident and ambitious and career-oriented as well. So how are the changing characters portrayed in film, how are they sort of linked with the emerging status of women in India right now?
I think in recent films, there's a refreshing reflection of what is going on in the society. The characters portrayed as independent, career-oriented, confident is actually a mirror of what is going on in the society right now in India. It's a genuine reflection of the societal changes that we are going through. And I think, as an actor, I think it's very important for me to pick roles like Mrs. Or Pataka, or Paglet, or Kathal. So these are the kind of films that we see, and these are the kind of women that we see around us. And I feel that cinema does a very beautiful role in shaping and putting light to such stories and to such characters.
So what are the most significant changes you've noticed since you started your career? Have those roles of women changed since you started? Or maybe when you were a young girl watching Bollywood yourself? What have you noticed?
Many. I think there's a refreshing and encouraging shift in the kind of roles that are being written and being offered to women in our industry. As I said, there are films. For example, Babita Kumari in Dangal, she defies the norms of a patriarchal village. Sandhya in Paglet finds independence and finds herself after the death of her husband. And Dr. Iram finds injustice and puts light on the corruption that is going on in the medical system. So I feel there's so much that is going on, this shift. I think it's a golden period. I was just talking to someone here and I told them it's a golden period for us as actors because there's so much that we can experiment with the rise in OTT and the kind of films that we are writing. There's so much experiment that we can do and so many women behind the camera and behind so many directors and writers writing just the perfect characters for us is putting women in the right way and representing women in the right way on screen.
Bit of a difficult question, but who has been your favourite character to play to date? Who's been the most fun and sort of empowering?
I think my debut, Babita, and Sandhya in Paglet. Sandhya, for sure, like I think it kind of changed me. It was inspiring and I saw so many people and so many women getting inspired by that character. Definitely a life-changing opportunity, I would say.
And why was it so inspiring? Tell us more about the character.
So Sandhya is someone who finds her own self, her identity, the sense of freedom after she loses her husband. That's when she realizes that she has never taken her own decisions. There are other people who have been taking her decisions on her behalf, whether it's what she should do, what she should study, what she should wear, to who she should get married to. And after I did that film, I think Paglet, it's on Netflix, and I met so many women who could relate to her, who could see themselves in that character, and I think that was kind of the validation. That's the ultimate validation for an actor, I think.
And it's nice to have those reflections, and you want people to sort of understand and sympathise and connect with a character, don't you? That's the whole sort of point.
Right.
So yeah, brilliant. What further changes do you want to see when it comes to women in cinema, both behind and in front of the camera? As you mentioned, of course, you've got a whole crew of lots of women behind the camera as well. So what sort of significant changes do you feel still need to be made?
More opportunities for women in front and behind the camera. More producers, directors, and writers can help with a more nuanced representation of women on screen. I think by working together as women, we can create more opportunities. I worked with Aarti Kadav, my director, in Mrs. My film is going to release in 3 days. Meghna Gulzar directed it. It's called Sam Bahadur. It's a biopic on Field Marshal Sam Manekshaw. And I think women get so much empathy to whatever they do. And I think it's a different ballgame altogether. I think by working together, we can create so much for each other. We can really focus on women from all parts of India, really put light there and make sure that we are covering every aspect and diversity of women.
So obviously we've spoken a little bit about your Bollywood journey, but what have been the main sort of complexities and obstacles that you found just because you're a woman? Has that been an issue, or has it been quite plain sailing? I mean, yeah, tell us a bit more about that landscape over in Bollywood.
To be honest, as I said, it's a golden period for me as an actor. For me, I'm very selective with the kind of roles that I'm picking to do. I know it's not easy because I have to keep my politics and the things that I like in forefront whenever I'm getting offered to do a film. I'm very careful with how I want to represent women on screen, because growing up, I don't think so I saw women being represented on screen properly. I feel we were easily replaceable by props. There were not many nuanced scripts and characters being written for women. There was no depth to it. And I think that shift kind of happened with years. And with Dangal, I realized that because I started off with such an unconventional role, which really put me out there. I had to cut my hair. It was not a conventional debut at all. That was kind of a foundation, a conditioning for me as an actor. I thought that if I have gone all out for my debut, then it's okay. I can like experiment and stick to what my values are and my views are going forward. So definitely not an easy one, but I think a very fulfilling one, for sure.
And have you had quite a supportive family structure to get into this industry as well? Because a lot of families don't really like, you know, Bollywood or going into acting. You've got to get serious jobs and things like that. You know, there's a stereotype to that as well.
Right.
So have you had quite a supportive family going into what you love?
I did, but for years I didn't tell them that I want to become an actor. I was quite reticent growing up, and so I lived in Delhi and was born and brought up there. And after my graduation, there was a period where I was trying to break this news to my parents that, listen, I always wanted to become an actor. All of this was like my plan B. So after my graduation, I participated in this dance reality show, thinking that I might get picked up from there to become an actor, which didn't work out. And I'm glad it didn't. But after that, I came back to Delhi and I told my father. My mother was really not happy with that news. She was like, no, please, will you complete your post-graduation, complete your studies, and then do whatever you want to. But I couldn't wait. And I'm glad I didn't, but my father was quite supportive, and I moved to Mumbai after that. I'm going to complete my 10 years in Mumbai this December, and I think it wasn't an easy shift, definitely, but I think I'm someone who looks for challenges. I'm someone who is always constantly looking for opportunities that will really push me out of my comfort zone, and I'm glad that I took that decision 10 years back.
That's the thing, you've got to take these risks in order to possibly be successful in any sense, right? And that's what we're going to be talking about, actually. That's the theme of a lot of our discussions is, you know, women need to take more risks. Do you think that's quite important for women to just bite the bullet?
Definitely. As I said, if you don't take risk, if you're not pushing yourself, if you're not pushing yourself out of your own comfort zone, there'll be no growth. And I'm constantly pushing myself, not only with acting, but with this too. I've never done this before, and I'm very nervous. My hands are shaking. I shouldn't have had coffee, but I'm going to do this again. Even if this is not nice, I'm going to work on it. I'll make sure that I'll prepare myself better the next time. And I think we need to constantly do that.
And it's good to share knowledge. That's why we're here at the end of the day, is to share your knowledge, to inspire people, to inform them.
Right.
So just before my last question, I'd like to know a little bit more about sort of women in senior leadership positions within Bollywood. Is that, you know, getting a little bit more advanced? Are we seeing a lot more sort of heads of these channels and things as well? Or is it still quite male-dominated?
No, it's not. Amazon is head by a woman. Netflix is head by a woman, and so many other production houses. I think I'm so glad that things are changing. There's so much, as I said, sympathy and empathy that women get when they're working. And as I said, it helps in a more nuanced representation for women on screen, which we really need. That change was needed in Bollywood, and I think these are the stories that resonate with the audience today. And we are getting the validation from the audience. Audience is also dissing the content that is not working, is not something that they can't relate to anymore. So these are the women that they want to see on screen. Women like Sandhya in Paglet or Babita in Dangal. So I think that things are changing and changing for good.
And just my last question, actually I've got a couple more questions, but what is your advice to any sort of budding, female actresses that are really desperate to get into this world of Bollywood, this amazing world of Bollywood? What is your advice to young women today?
My advice to aspiring actresses would be to stay true to yourself, to challenge the stereotypes, to embrace the opportunities that you're getting, surround yourself with supportive people, and keep working on your craft.
And my sort of final question is, do you think, I said it right at the beginning, we're going to talk about, can women have it all? How do we juggle, family, friends, social life, work, passion? Can women have it all? Of
course we can. I think that's when we need all of us to work together. It's not a gender thing. If we work together towards it, of course we'll be able to achieve it all.
That's all we have time for. It's been a great pleasure, an absolutely delight that you've managed to join us. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for Sanya Malhotra. Thank you. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much. Really wonderful to have you here, and thank you so much once again. Thank you. Oh, yes. Let's take a quick photograph. Wonderful. Thank you so much once again. Really lovely to meet you. Thank you. Yes. Wonderful. Well, ladies and gentlemen, what a great pleasure to have a Bollywood superstar in the house with us today. Hey, that was absolutely brilliant. Well, ladies and gentlemen, entrepreneurial progress in the last decade has changed the face and brains of India. And women have been at the forefront of a huge part of this progress. Did you know that 15% of India's unicorn startups have at least one woman founder, with a total worth of $40 billion US. Quite an achievement there. I'm now joined, ladies and gentlemen, my next guest is a true woman of influence, a pioneer in the retail space, and someone that is a huge role model for women entrepreneurs today, who is here to answer the billion-dollar question: can women do it all, and do they really have to? Well, our next guest, as a bit of background, founded the Apparel Group in 1996, a multi-billion-dollar international retailer headquartered here in the UAE. The company has over 80 brands and 2,025 stores in 14 countries with over 20,000 employees. And its founder, who is with us here today, was named, ladies and gentlemen, as the 12th most powerful businesswoman in the Middle East by Forbes. I'm now absolutely delighted. We are privileged to have here with us today our next guest. Please give a very warm welcome to Seema Ganwani Ved, the founder and chairwoman of Apparel Group UAE. A very warm welcome. Just rearranging the furniture, just a couple of moments there, and we will get started. Seema, how are you? Yes. So wonderful to have you here. We cannot thank you enough for making the time. I know you are a very busy lady, so thank you so much.
Not at all.
And yes, really wonderful to have you here. And I thought we'd get started about, your journey through creating the Apparel Group. And you come from a family of self-made entrepreneurs. So actually, you've got a little bit of an advantage because you've got entrepreneurship in your blood. All of your family sort of come from this sort of sector. So I wanted, to start off with how you built the Apparel Group and also what inspired you and what sort of support you had.
So it's amazing. Or do I need a separate mic? Thank you so much for having me, and thank you to India Global Forum for doing this. So like you rightfully said, right, I have not just a slight advantage, I actually have a massive advantage. And he's in the room today, my father, Lal Ganwani, the reason why I became a retailer, because watching someone so passionately work day in, day out, weekends, didn't care whether it was night or day, just had to get it done. So I think when you come from a family that sort of has that work ethics or even has that ethos in life, you can't go wrong. So that's, of course, my starting point. How I build the apparel group, it's so funny. My husband has this thing where he says, there's my reality, his reality, and the reality. So I think in my reality, I, of course, built it with the story, and we talked about it, the gold that I sold in my wedding, and my father turned around the other day and said to me, well, I did give you a store that had a rent of almost 500,000 dirhams, and you didn't have to pay it right away. And I was like, that is so true. That's the reality. That yes, I did sell the gold I got in my wedding, more to cover our operational costs and start off the business, because when he did give me the store, I actually didn't know that it was going to become my source of livelihood. I thought it was just something I was going to do while my husband worked with his family business. Lo and behold, we both left our respective family businesses and had to start with something from scratch. So that 47,000 dirhams, and I kick myself that I didn't keep the receipt, but that would have been amazing to frame as the beginning of what today is the apparel group.
Absolutely fascinating journey. I wanted to focus a little bit more about sort of men on your journey and male influence, because obviously you've spoken a little bit about that, but what sort of support, what has been the male influence in your life, and how important has that been to you?
So, every single one that I've come across, I mean, of course, the ones that I look up to and I'm eternally grateful for are my father and my husband. Without them, like my husband, I think, has the nerve to do a lot of things what a lot of men, I wouldn't say men, but I would say Indian men wouldn't do. He plastered my face on Sheikh Zayed Road on a 10-meter by 4-meter billboard when I wanted to try a stint at a chat show. So, not a lot of men have the confidence to do that, but he does. He does let me shine whenever I want to and wherever I can. Having said that, I thank every single one of the other men that I've come across in my life, because honestly speaking, whether they've treated me as arm candy or they've kind of waited for me to leave the room to have the real business talk with my husband, it's all been such a journey. Like, I thank them. I thank them for being condescending. I thank them for treating me like I'm a little lady who's just keeping herself busy at the office. Oh, your husband's letting you come to work. That's so sweet of him. I thank every single one of them, because believe it or not, I could probably buy their company out today. So I'm just glad for them.
Little do they know, exactly. Little do they know. Let's talk about a quote that I was reading that you were quoted by saying, "We need to acknowledge that gender inequality is not a women's issue; it's a human issue." And I'd like you to expand on that.
Okay, so look, we are, like it or not, we are half the population. With us having been half the population, it's honestly a waste of your time not to tap into the potential that's out there. Like, we are a talent pool just waiting to be utilized and used to our maximum. And if you're not going to believe me about this, I was just reading up on a few facts, and there was a McKinsey report that basically said that companies that have more women on their executive leadership positions actually outperform by 21% their counterparts. Not just that, there was another study I read. Yes, I did kind of memorize these for you guys. But there's a Peterson Institute of International Economics, and that study says that having 30% women in your leadership positions, and please do hear this, adds up to 6% to your net profit margins. Like, if you're not going to believe me about how we need to tap into the pool that is ready and waiting, and all you need to do is utilize it, then what can I say? Well, at least believe my Feng Shui expert. She says categorically, 2024 is the year of the woman. So if you want
There
to...
you go. Brilliant news.
I mean, don't believe McKinsey, don't believe Peterson, don't believe even the Catalyst research that says that having more women on your boards or companies that have more women on their boards will outperform those that have less women simply in terms of the return of equity by 16%. So forget all of that. Let's just look at the feng shui aspect of it. 2024 is the year of the woman. So if you want to dominate in whatever industry you are in, either go ahead and promote the women that are a part of your company or hire more women in leadership executive positions. That's what I would say.
Very well said indeed, by the way. So just going back to your upbringing, you've had quite a different upbringing to some of your family over in India, for example. Tell us about some of the major opportunities and sort of complexities that both of you have had to navigate as a woman in business, and what do you tell us about those main differences and what those are?
So, you know, we were having family discussions where I was talking about how I fought to go to university. My father's a very reasonable man. He's in the room. I can't say much more than that. He is a very reasonable man. And he said to me growing up, anytime you want to do something, just reason with me. If it makes sense, I'll let you do it. So when I said to him, I want to go to university, he's like, why? I said, because I have the same amount of capability that my brother does, and he went to NYU, why can't I? That was enough for him. He said, fine, go to university. When I wanted to work, when I was at university, he said to me, I'll give you a week and you need to come back if you want a job. And I ran back and I had a job. So he's always kept me motivated, always. And in contrast, I was having a discussion with some girls in our family, and sadly, they weren't allowed to go to university outside of India. Then they weren't given the opportunity to work at all. They were told, no, this is a very traditional male-dominated industry. And I understand their father's point of view for not letting them work in that scenario, but I think here's where I think it could have been done differently, and I wish more men out there or fathers or brothers would think about this, that if you run a male-dominated traditional business and you can't incorporate the females in your house in those businesses, I mean, by all means, get them to start something of their own or encourage them to go ahead and pursue further studies or do something else with it. So I just think that's a bit of a, I mean, it's a catch-22. So you really need to push as well. Like the girls need to have the guts to push as well.
Because, how do we reassure families that don't want their daughters to go into these male-dominated fields, but then how do we sort of make change? So, I mean, we need women in those sort of like stereotypical male roles in order to sort of change the system. So what can we do to reassure sort of families if women are going into STEM subjects and different sort of industries like that, and it's fully male-dominated? Is it because, how do we need to reassure families so that women can progress, right?
So I always love what YPO, the organization that I'm a part of, Young Presidents Organization, they have a theory, and they have a theory that they use and apply. They say that anytime you want to integrate two new people, you want to integrate a new person into your forum or wherever, make sure it's two of them. So I just believe there is something to be said that their numbers will help. So instead of just sending your one daughter or one sister, make sure you find a friend of hers or a cousin or someone and integrate 2 or 3 people, then there's a bit of solace in numbers. Like you feel a little better when there's more of us out there.
Yeah, no, completely agreed. Anyone going into anything when you're brand new is always terrifying, but if it's, male-dominated, then it's sort of highlighted. A very quick question as well. Where should we start when raising our daughters then? It's got to be sort of from the ground up, don't you think? So it's got to start with education, it's got to start from the home. And I also want you to sort of tell us a little bit more about your thoughts on how you think sort of men should speak to women in the workplace, because I know there has been a bit of controversy in, I think, a friend of yours who owned a VC fund.
Ah, yes, I know where you're going with that.
There was someone took things, the wrong way. And anyway, tell us the story.
No, so I was telling Laura when we spoke yesterday that, a friend of mine who's actually a very well-known, very, very well-established VC in this part of the world, and she used to work in a company with partners. And the partners made it a point Maybe they were trying to be nice, but they made it a point every now and again to comment on how she looked, what she wore, how she dressed. And it came to a point where she actually told them, she's like, I really don't need you to tell me how I look. Because would you do that to a male colleague? Like a male colleague coming in, would you say, hey, I really like that blue jacket on you? He'd just look at you weird, right? So same thing, why is it okay to comment on how a woman dresses or how she walks into the office? And same thing with, when you're talking to your PA or you're talking to your, your CEO and she's a woman, don't feel free to put your hand on her shoulder. She doesn't want that. So I just think these kind of nuances at work, and like you said, right, how do we do this with girls from the beginning? I think girls from the beginning need to be told that it's not okay. It's not okay for someone to cross your personal space or your personal boundaries, even if it's an uncle, a cousin, or whatever. Be very clear. I don't really like that. Don't do that. So I think having taught girls to speak up, which is why, my earlier point of had these girls in my family said, no, I actually want to work. And if I'm not going to work where you're working, send me somewhere where I can. So I just think letting people obstruct your own potential is our own doing. We cannot keep blaming our families or our parents or our husbands. We've got to take charge of what we want to do.
And I suppose, it's having a voice to say what you want as well. I don't really like the way that you commented on my clothes. But then again, you can sort of see it on the other side. Flattery gets you everywhere. So it's one of those things where they're probably, trying to flatter her to, I don't know, maybe do business. So it's one of those things that can be quite...
Laura, I told Laura a story. I was dealing with a media partner who had rubbed me the wrong way in the sense he was being very rude at another event. And he tried to make up with an apology call. So we're having this call where he's apologizing to me that he didn't really mean to ignore me or blah, blah, blah. And suddenly I'm like thinking, okay, I'm kind of going to forgive this guy. And then he goes to me, darling. And I stopped and I was like, And he goes, darling, if I ever tell you my story, you'll understand what I mean. And I looked at myself and I was thinking, would he call my husband darling? If he was having a partnership call, like it was a call for a business client whom you have upset, how dare you call me darling? I mean, seriously, like where do you get your manners?
I know.
These are not business manners. You cannot turn around. My husband would slap you if you called him darling. I would hope he would slap you. So I'm just saying that these are the little nuances, again, for people when you're out there, and women. When we hear men call us darling, sweetheart, whatever, like, no, go use that on your wife at home or your girlfriend. Don't do that here.
Because it can come across as very patronizing at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Right, let's move into the retail landscape. What needs to be done for more diversity and inclusion within retail? And what do we need to sort of push forward to create a more inclusive environment, especially within leadership positions as well? I think that's where we're lacking, right?
So I think, I was having a conversation with my husband, and he was saying to me, India now has a law that you have to have one woman on every board. How sad is that it had to become a law for it to happen? Like, nobody saw the sense in it, in its intrinsic value of having a diverse opinion on the board, but the government had to make it a law for people to understand that this is important. So to me, that's what it is, right? If that's what we need more laws to bring about the change that says women are a relevant, important part of any decision-making process. If there's a table, we've got to have a say on it, because we are representing 50% of the population. So if there are more laws to be made that help in that transition, then yes, so be it, partially. But also, like running a general gender audit at your company, checking that every level where you have enough gender diversity, enough representation, I think that's super important. And also, I think, if we actually look at it, a lot of companies don't want to hire women because they go off and they have their kids and then they come back. But even like I referred to YPO, they've acknowledged that women have a different career trajectory or path to men. So they've actually increased the membership cutoff age as 55 years as opposed to men at 45 years. And I applaud them for that. I mean, having addressed the fact that women actually need to be given the space and time to do both. So, hey, God gave us the responsibility for mankind. So you should be respectful and letting us have the time and space to do that as well as what else we can do at work. Why should we have to give up one or the other?
So if you're up for it, I'm going to give our audience one question to throw at you. Would you mind? Is that okay? Right, we have one, we've only got time for one question. So one lucky person in the room right now gets to ask one question. This is your one opportunity. I'm hoping we've got some microphones around. We've got a gentleman right at the back over there. That's the only person I can see, so I beg your pardon if you've got your hands up. Do tell us who you are and where you're from and your question, please.
Yeah, that's fine. Anyone would like to ask a question because it's just one question? Okay, fine. So, hi, I'm Paresh Deshmukh. I'm from UK, so I run a cybersecurity firm. And whatever you said, I perfectly 100% in agreement with that. Just only my opinion is, you mentioned about that darling thing. It might be cultural aspect as well, right? So in UK, it is pretty much common to when you have peaceful conversation and all that. So my request to all women is just take that cultural angle as well. It may not be always bad.
So can I ask you a reverse question, right? I 100% agree with you, but having said that, the guy speaking to me was Arab national, and I'm an Indian.
That is what I'm saying.
So in our culture, it isn't normal to go around calling people darling, right? But I'm going to ask you a reverse question. In the Desis, especially when men talk, it's very common to say BCMC. You know what I'm talking about. So would that be okay if, No. So how come? How come? How come you just said no? I mean, if I come into your office and I start, my mouth just goes like a washerwoman and says BC and MC and
No.
Would that be okay? No, but it's cultural. It's okay to do it.
No.
It's not, right? Exactly. So the word to me, darling, has a place in, I don't know, maybe in the bedroom,
close
maybe
family.
Somebody I know really well. Why would you call me darling?
Right.
No matter if you're from the UK.
I respect your opinion.
That was a good statement. You were very brave, by the way.
I'm so sorry.
Literally an absolute joy to have you here. Thank you so much for sharing your journey, your experience. It's been really wonderful to have you here. Thank you for making time.
Thank you.
Seema Ganwani Ved, thank you so much. You can do a quick photograph here. Very up to it. What brilliant conversations we've had so far to women of influence there. And don't call them darling. That's the key message, ladies and gentlemen. Do not call us darling. Right. Continuing with entrepreneurship, ladies and gentlemen, over in India, over 20% of women are MSME owners, which account for over 23% of the labour force and are considered the backbone of the economy. Our next guests are here to get us up to speed on women entrepreneurs in evolving markets, how to lead with purpose, as well as the main complexities that they face today. And I'm absolutely delighted to be welcoming them here today. Please give a very warm welcome to our first guest, Dr. Shamdutta Singh, founder and CEO of Assidious Global UAE. A very warm welcome. Let's give her a nice warm welcome, shall we? Thank you for coming. You may take this seat here.
Thank you, Laura.
Hi, lovely to meet you. Right, next up, ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for Muthoni Mutonyi, founder of Jirani.co.ke, Kenya. A very warm welcome. Lovely to have you here as well. Hope you're well. Please do take a seat. And rounding out our panel today is Julie Barbier-Leblar, CEO and co-founder of Merit Incentives UAE. A very warm welcome. Yet another stellar lineup of speakers. We've done very well. The program team has done incredibly well booking all of our speakers. So thank you so much for joining us and taking the time out. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura, for having us.
Right. I'm going to start off with some recent figures. Recent figures show that companies founded solely by women received less than 3% of all venture capital funding and investments. Part of this is because women entrepreneurs, by the way, are seen as more high risk as men. We are risky, apparently, when it comes to investments. So why are women seen as more risky, and what is the reality? I'd like to open that up to all of you.
Thank you, Laura. With your permission, I can maybe give my 30 seconds to a minute. So, of course, we're risky. Think about it. We're ready to bear a child 9 months in our womb, letting go of everything. So, we are usually the ones who take more risk. But why do they find us more risky? Is because they often forget, or rather, investors often forget that women are naturally nurturers. The power of the 2 X chromosomes, which men don't have. So I think they need more empathy than us. But coming to the facts, yes, less than 3% get funded. Large part of the reason is not that they don't need funding. A lot of them build companies that are self-funded. The MSMEs in India, and of course, I have my eminent co-panelists to talk about Africa and Europe, they are all very self-sustainable. But when an investor is looking at an opportunity, sometimes when they look at a single or a solo woman founder, in my case, when I was raising funding, the reason I heard a lot of no's is like, what if you get married? What if you have a child? Are you sure you can manage the emotions? So sometimes that comes in the way. But are we risky? Let me give you a figure. 89.6% of women-run enterprises are profitable. Now that deserves a round of applause, because that is the fact that even if less than 3% get funded, they build the most profitable businesses globally. So with that, I think I have my other co-panelists that can share their thoughts as well.
Because of course we're going to be, seen as a little bit risky if you're going to have a family. And the important thing is that, sometimes we need a lot of, flexibility. And so flexibility, I think, is a key sort of issue there as well. But please, go ahead on to your sort of thoughts on whether we're too risky and
Yeah, I do believe there is a perception that people do think that women are risky as founders and co-founders. But yeah, like you said, it's not necessarily true. We're able to actually carry a lot of burdens and take up a lot of responsibilities. We can raise children and also run businesses. There are a lot of us that are mothers and wives, and we take care of those responsibilities along with running a successful business. And even if you put aside business, people who are in careers, who are in employment, are able to juggle all of those responsibilities and grow their careers in employment. So it is a perception. But the truth is, actually, I was reading some statistics from the Boston Consulting Group. And the Boston Consulting Group that says that for every dollar that is invested in a woman-owned business, they get 78 cents on the dollar. While in comparison, for the men-founded business, they get 31 cents on the dollar. That's from the Boston Consulting Group.
Wow.
That's a big disparity, 78 cents on the dollar against 31 cents on the dollar from the Boston Consulting Group. So the facts show that women are quite capable of starting businesses that are successful.
There you go, exactly. That's why we've got you up here, yeah.
I don't need the mic. I'm already mic'd. So the interesting part, I think, and the question on the risk is any investor, being an angel investor myself as well, I always ask myself this kind of question. What kind of risk I'm taking on investing in a startup or in a company? And the interesting part is usually women entrepreneurs bootstrap. So they start self-funded with very limited means. Like the resources are extremely limited, and they usually go to family and friends, and even most of the time they don't even want to bother family and friends. So they want to make their business sustainable very quickly. They don't brag about it most of the time, and they go through the life and usually choose entrepreneurship to be able to sustain with their family life. I started personally my career in Paris as a finance lawyer. And I had my first child as working for one of the top law firms. And I find it not sustainable. So the only way for me to continue to grow my family was to become an entrepreneur. I raised my first seed of investment pregnant of my third child. And I'm going through Series A with 3 kids under the age of 5 at that time. So we went through everything, and we keep growing the company and did 9x in 3 years. So we are not a risk. Actually, if you find a way to invest carefully your money, and you have women that actually went through this, you have less risk and less exposure than other entrepreneurs, because we don't take this lightly. We know that it engages our entire family, our entire ecosystem, and we also have the burden of representing an entire part of the population. If we fail, all other women entrepreneurs are impacted. So we have a much higher burden on our shoulders than anyone else. I've never seen a male entrepreneur saying, I'm representing the entire male entrepreneurs in the world, you know? But usually we are asked this kind of thing. What do you feel as a woman entrepreneur? What do I feel as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, exactly.
The whole idea, what she said, entrepreneurship is so much about attitude and less about gender. If we women include men in all the discussions we have, I think they will also feel a little more included than excluded. I think that will create a little more parity. That's for all the men, because they have families too. You can't say that a man can't take care of a child. It's just we need to just let them feel okay that, listen, if you're staying home and taking care of the family, you're equally good, right? It is not your burden to go and sustain the family. Let us do it for a change. We're good with money anyways.
Well, that's the thing. It's breaking out of tradition, which is never going to happen overnight, right? Yep. And everyone, there's gender bias. There's all of us have subconscious bias when it comes to gender bias at the end of the day. All of us have it, no matter what. So it's knowing how to sort of change that narrative at the end of the day, isn't it? But speaking of risks, do you think that there are less women entrepreneurs because women in general take less risks? We don't like to take risks like men do.
That's a brilliant question, and it goes back, we had a panel in the morning that we were talking about diversity and inclusion. So let's go back to the roots, and I think Vimal ji is here as well, and we were generally talking about upbringing. Laura, think about upbringing, whether it's a Western family, or European family, or an Indian family. Typically, you're brought up in a way where the boy automatically is expected to be stronger. Physically they are, because we're not here discussing, deliberating on physical equality at all. Biologically, we are different and will always be. The men can lift heavier weights, and we're not trying to compete with that. What it is about the weight of the family. So typically when you are taught that you need to go out there, you need to fight the battles, men have to do it. If you ask me, we talk about feminism, Laura, who's bearing their flag of masochism? And this discussion is important, because when you constantly put pressure on the other gender, they will automatically start putting the same pressure on you, and that's what is happening to us. If you change the narrative a little bit, the three of us sitting here, we're all very well accomplished. I'm a founder and a funder. How about we pick up a few investments and say, we will do it together. We lead the mantle. That is where the challenge comes in. But you're right, because we're taught to be, less risk takers, because we know that the men will do it. We're a little risk averse because we are more comfortable. We're like the nurturers in the family versus the one that is going ahead and earning for the family. But because we were talking, Julie, about this example, and I share this again, those who didn't attend the panel. My fiance is Danish. He's a lawyer. When we first met, I said, listen, the only way it's going to work is if you join my company. He said, great, I'll be your legal counsel. Whether it's the Scandinavian mindset or whatever you call it, he's a phenomenal cook. Phenomenal. And I'm horrible at kitchen. He's like, stay away. So we often discuss this, and he said this, listen, there's a reason the greatest chef of the world are men, and the best banker of the world is women. I'm letting you make the money while I'll make great food for you. So it takes one to make the change. I let him lead in the kitchen. So he lets me lead the business. So if we allow them to lead a little, like if we lead and we set that by example, I think the risk-taking tenacity will improve, and men will also be more okay to take the back seat and be the homemakers if need be.
At the end of the day, it's an individual thing as well. People are very, very different. You get sort of alpha males, and then, everyone's different in their own right as well. But it's just interesting to see how society sort of is changing and how quickly the landscape changes as well. I wanted to move over to Kenya for a moment and just take a look at the entrepreneurial climate over there. How is the climate for entrepreneurs, for women entrepreneurs, and what sort of business trends and models are you seeing emerge?
Yeah, in Kenya, it's very interesting because it's a space I'm playing in, because I run a startup that's called Jirani, and Jirani enables the small businesses. Particularly, I have a bias for women-owned businesses, especially those who sell from home. I don't necessarily have a shop, and if they do have a shop, it's a small pickup kind of shop. So the business models that I'm seeing are very interesting. I've seen, women traditionally in Africa, and now particularly focusing in Kenya, from many years back, they have formed groups. These groups are called chamas, and these chamas were initially they were for the purposes of just collecting money amongst themselves. Maybe it might be money they were given by their husbands or money that they've made from selling something, and they collect it, pull it together so that they have now a bigger pool of money and they can do bigger things together. So this togetherness has always been there amongst women, and the model that I'm seeing now is these women are monetizing the groups that they're forming. So I'm seeing a lot of WhatsApp groups being formed, Facebook groups, and what they do is they accumulate a lot of followers inside of those groups. I've seen groups that have like 35,000 members, 50,000 members. Some even have 100,000 members of women who've come together. And because now you have an audience of listeners and audience of potential buyers, they now charge for advertising on those groups. And the groups have they have a reputation of being a safer place because I think the group admins do vet who comes in. And so there's a lot of buying and selling that's happening in WhatsApp groups and Facebook groups. There's also another model I've seen on Instagram where people, again, with a large following on their Instagram page, what they do is they'll help you advertise what you are selling. So let's say you have a bed in your house. It's a decluttering kind of thing. You have a bed in your house. You want to get rid of it and earn some money, a little bit of money at least as you're getting rid of it. And you can give her the pictures. This lady who runs this Instagram page, there's several of them because she has a lot of following. And you give her pictures of what you're selling. She charges you a small amount, 760 or 750 shillings, which might be about, I want to say about $5. It's not much. It's not much money. But there's a lot of volume, so she earns a living that way. So the coming togetherness of the women, they naturally come together to support each other and help each other. And now I'm seeing a lot of women starting to monetize that.
That's great. Yeah. And there's actually a lot of that in Dubai. So a lot of expats, a lot of these expat mums, it's all the mums. They form these groups, they're able to monetize it. And it is actually a nice way. And that's the thing, when you do have a family and things, as I was mentioning, flexibility is a big thing, which is why I suppose that, women go towards entrepreneurship. As you mentioned, it wasn't sustainable for you. So you had to basically make it sustainable with, going into entrepreneurship. Very quickly, just different countries have varied sort of support systems for growth. Data shows that 11% of venture capital funding in 2021 in the UAE went to female founders. However, that's compared to the global average of 3%. So 11% here in the UAE. The ground here is quite fertile, and there's a lot of encouragement for sort of women entrepreneurs as well. What's your take on that as well when it comes to the UAE in particular?
So you can hear I'm a French national, but I've been in the UAE for 13 years. The possibility and the opportunities that I got in the UAE, I would have never been able to dream about it, even in Europe. Why? Because there is no gender bias specifically related to business. So as long as you are an expert, you can deliver. And people give you an opportunities and you can make it. So I'm not surprised about the numbers, specifically in the UAE. We are not talking about the entire region where actually it's much lower, even lower than the global average. But what is interesting is things are changing. The population in the region is very young. So there will be no choice actually to follow. And women won't allow this for their kids as well. They want everyone to have the same opportunity. I think what we are seeing at the moment, a lot of women founders are funded now, but we have a challenge going to the next series. A, B, C, D, it's more challenging because it's becoming more sophisticated and you have less exposure or less opportunities actually to reach that level. So it takes a lot of chance as well, maybe, or a lot of hard work to reach at that level. But I think the success will come from the fact that we can also help not only at pre-seed or seed, but also at a later stage. And I think for any woman founder in the world, if you want a country that helps you to go to the next phase, I think UAE is perfect. Because I find myself the balance where I can also have access to support services. I have actually the possibility to hire people to help me, which was not the case in Europe as much. So the flexibility and the capacity and the opportunity and the fact that people give you a chance anytime has been really key to the success.
I would like to add something to what, it's fantastic what Julie talked about. I'll just give you a personal anecdote. I moved to Dubai from New York in 2019 to just expand my business. The happiest I had felt was finally I didn't have to clean my own toilets because I can afford a full-time maid, right? So it's got the lifestyle of the West and it's got the culture of the East. Having said that, contrary to common belief, this is the most woman, non-gender fostering country ever. It outbeats US. It's absolutely non-racist. Everybody can come and succeed. And the equity that we talk about is actually available in this country, right? Even though my company was founded in the US and we're US headquartered, this region is the second largest for us. And Laura, not just that, when I raised my Series A, which was last year, we're raising 15 million, we got oversubscribed, all the lead investors were from this region. And I heard no's from US investors, Indian investors. But the moment they took the lead here, there was a FOMO. Everybody wanted to be a part of it, right? So this region doesn't care about FOMO. It cares about real business. It cares about value proposition. It looks at you as an equal. And the best businesses foster under respect. If you have respect for an individual as a great business personal, then everything else follows. So this region, I think, even the government goes all out. And Julie, you can pitch in. The government is like, try in India, you will not be able to meet, some of the biggest professionals because it's so hard to get through the ministers and all that. Here, they're accessible to you. They'll say, please come. Tell us what else can we do to support. So this region is a hotbed for entrepreneurship. It competes in all levels with the West, but it doesn't have the bias of the West or the East. And it is absolutely looking at entrepreneurship as a genderless aspect, looks at you only from potential.
Very well said. And everything that you said there is spot on, actually. Yeah, that deserves a round of applause. Thank you. Because it is a very nurturing environment here, and you can do whatever.
Yeah,
if you have a great idea, try it out, take the risk, fail if you have to a couple of times. But the framework here is really brilliant. Moving over to Kenya, what's the framework like over there to sort of nurture and encourage? And is there any sort of government structure around women entrepreneurship?
There is, yes. In Kenya, we're seeing a lot of venture capitalists coming in general just to support the founders that exist in Kenya. And I do see them playing particular focus on women because earlier I was with Antler. I have a relationship with Antler, one of the VCs in Kenya.
I've interviewed Magnus.
Oh,
Ragland.
right.
Yeah,
I've interviewed him, yeah. So they've set up in Kenya. I think they've been there about 5 years or so in Kenya. And I see them trying to make sure that in every cohort that they bring in for their entrepreneur in residence program, that they have a 50% women versus 50% men. So there's a focus on that. I also see Google coming in with accelerator programs. They were giving out statistics saying that only 17% of the businesses that are funded in Africa are women owned, and they're trying to change that. They're making efforts. So there's a lot of efforts done from the private aspect, but also the country itself, the government is making efforts to facilitate it so that women can also start their businesses. So there is truly a focus on getting women up to the ones who are eager to start businesses. They're getting the opportunities to start.
That's really good news. Yeah. Very quickly over to Julie, just before we move out over to our audience. Please get some really good audience questions going. If you have any questions, now is your time, just after this last question. Julie, how do we break stereotypes around whether women are capable of doing business then? What sort of how do we break these stereotypes?
I think we need to, we have a duty as well as women founder to give back and invest in other women entrepreneurs, that's for sure. I think it's also we need to accept that, again, I come back to failure, but it's okay to fail. And we need to let people to try and grow. And I think also maybe to have, I won't have a lot of friends if I say that in the audience, but to have a different type of people that invest. You shouldn't have only women at a level of being an analyst in a VC world, for example. You should have principal and partners, actually, that are also part of the decision process. And they come with a different type of qualities and different type of perception. I remember when I started my career as a finance lawyer that usually I was the only woman in the room and they didn't really understand my method. And this is what we face sometimes when we pitch to investors as well. They say, it's beautiful what you have achieved. We are very impressed, but we don't understand. And they don't understand because they put themselves in their own shoes and they don't try another method or another perception of... and I'm not saying that I have a great board investor. I have the first female partner in Saudi, a Saudi national actually, that invested in our company. So, but it takes a lot of effort and it took a long journey to be able to reach to that level. And I think we need to continue to foster success stories over and over and failure as well to be able to change the mindset.
Keep telling your stories, exactly.
Yes.
Right, moving on over to our audience here today. We have a gentleman in the front. If we could just get a microphone very quickly to him. Tell us who you are and your company and the question you'd like to ask.
Yeah, my name is Praveen. I'm the CEO of a company from Kerala. Our company name is Safe Software. So I just, we are talking about gender biased, so I'm just I think, the investors always invest on the business and the leadership of that person. So do you think that, even the men are biased to invest just because it is a woman there? I don't think so.
I don't think I even need a mic anymore. So, very honestly, I don't think the bias is a conscious bias. It's a subconscious bias. So imagine if I came and pitched to you, right? You're sitting in a great VC firm, you've come out of Harvard Business School, never built a business in your life, but you're now listening to me pitch. The first thing is, how's she doing it? Is it gonna work? But if I'm a man, I'm coming and pitching to you, and it's completely subconscious. You're like, let's go have a cigarette together, maybe go for a drink. Maybe I can't do that with you. And sometimes that progression of the relationship, because people invest in people, and the progression of a relationship is a bifactor of many attributes. So if I hang out, and this is where the bias ends, right? If you have these three women and then Laura on this panel, it just shows women build great successful business, are from amazing VC framework. I have a family office that invests in businesses. If I'm investing in you, I only care about the business. However, if I have to build a relationship with you, I have to find commonalities. That's where the challenge comes in. Because like Julie said, the people sitting on the other side are less than 10%. You'll see a woman in a partner role. Is why I want to give a shout out to Shafali, who's, by the way, the only chair in a Big Four ever, and we were on a panel together. That's rare. Imagine how sad is that she's the first and only chairperson. I'm sure she's leading the mantle for many more to come. She's right there. But I'm just saying, that's a subconscious bias. That's what we are battling. We're saying, let it be genderless. If you're listening to us, forget it. It's a mask. Look at us based on potential. Don't go by whether I have family, whether I'm going to get married, whether I have 5 children. Nope, she can do it with her 3rd children. I can do it with 100 other things on my plate, taking care of my family. She's doing it being out of Kenya. Anybody can do it. So that's the idea.
Let me also add to that. I completely agree with what you've said. But I also want to add, the bias also starts from who is going to come and present to you to pitch on the business. In the sense that women, a lot of women lack the courage to actually even start something. They may have it in their mind, but they won't get the courage to actually develop their idea and also start pitching. So even the number of women who will present to you will be fewer.
Very good question there as well. Do you think it's a matter of maybe implementing, blind pitching? So no one knows who you are, where you're from, what you look like, whether you're a man or a woman. Here's the product, here's the pitch, maybe make it robotic, and then people can literally just, take a look at it as it comes.
I think if I can add, even on your question before, I think we won't see that in the coming years. Because the new generation is completely gender neutral, in a sense. That they don't ask even themselves the question of, can I do it, or is there a perception of being a woman or man? I think we come from a different generation. And we had still to go through this thing I was explaining in the panel this morning, and when I asked my dad to go in business school, he told me it's not for girls. And while he's educated and he's an entrepreneur, so it's crazy thinking, you know? And even now, we are laughing about this anecdote. But what I'm saying, in the future, I don't think we'll have this kind of question. And coming back to your question about blind pitching, I think, like you said, we invest in people. Like, you can have the crappiest business idea, but at the end, if you look like you are onto something, the team is great, you have skills, maybe anyway, an idea is just the beginning, and then you keep pivoting. This is what makes you successful. Most of the time, you start and you pivot and grab opportunities, and at some point, it explodes and works. So,
anyway, right, one last question. We've got time for one last question, very, very quickly. We have a lady in the front. We've had a man's question. Let's have a woman's one now. Let's make it equal, shall we?
Thank you so much. My name is Purvi Roy. I'm a founder and CEO of Arista Vault. My question to you is, yes. So what, according to you, women as a leader, what is that one quality that identify or defines women as a leader from men? What is that, and how do you think that it is good to embrace that quality?
That's an amazing question, by the way, and thank you so much for that, Purvi. Do you know the one thing that differentiates us is vulnerability. With vulnerability comes empathy. With empathy comes accountability. With accountability comes action. That's why we are so much more different than, you know, men, because if you, I think Veda VC was a part of my panel in the morning, and Vasant was talking about that the only people who adhere to timelines on sending their MIS to sending their quarterly updates is women. Once we decide we are going to do it, we are undeterred. And the word vulnerable is it's not a weak word. It means you are able to demonstrate your strengths and weaknesses with equal vigor. You know, I had an opportunity to do a thesis with Dr. Amar Bose, and I don't know how many of you know, he's the founder of Bose Systems, right? He passed away in 2013. When I had gone down to work with him, he had asked me one thing, you know, Julie. He said, make a list of things you think is important to be an entrepreneur. And you know, Laura, I made a list of all my strengths. He tore it into pieces and he said, you're an idiot. I cried so much that night because he was my idol. He's the only Bengali I knew who ever built a business, because Bengalis don't really get into businesses. You know, we are either doctors, scientists, engineers, and lawyers. It's not our forte. He had said, you forgot to write your weaknesses. A good entrepreneur hires someone who's better than them. That's how you build legacy. Vulnerability helps you to identify that, and that's why we are equal.
Very well said. Sadly, that is all we have time for. Very, very well said. We cannot thank you enough. Sadly, we have run out of time. We're going to have to wrap up. But thank you so much for your insights. There is really no shortage of ambition. So thank you so much for inspiring us today. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for our panel. Thank you. Thank you for having us. Well done. Thank you. Oh, we're going to have a quick photograph. Thank you. Well, yes, that was a fantastic question there, because that leads perfectly into our next discussion point, where we're going to be talking about female bosses, actually, and how they lead differently, or if they even do lead differently. So even though male bosses continue to outnumber female ones, the latter, as we were mentioning, have unique qualities that one might say might make them even more transformational than their male counterparts. So What are those qualities exactly? And what are those leadership skills? And what does it truly mean to lead from the front? Time now to find out in our next discussion, which is titled, Who's the Boss? Time now to find out and to lead discussions. I'm absolutely delighted to hand over now to Vikram Chandra, founder and editor of G, who's with us here today. Very warm welcome. Let's give him a nice round of applause.
Hi, Laura. Thank you so much. And I'm looking around for my panelists. There we are. I'm not really going to try and introduce these people, not in a gathering like this, but Professor Manoj Ladwa, do come up. And Shefali Goradia, Chairperson, South Asia and Partner, Deloitte, India. Shefali, come here. Manoj, come there. Doing well. Good. I'm going to dive straight into it. But first of all, I think starting to ask the first question, is there a difference in leadership style between men and women? That is the question which was asked right now, and I think that's why we are segueing away into this. Is there a difference in leadership style between men and women, and if so, what is that difference?
Hi, I believe there is a difference, but again, I think it's more of an evolving trend that you see today, the leadership style, even when men are leading the organizations, it is different from when it was before. And of course, Som in the previous panel put it beautifully. I think now the leaders are far more open to expressing the vulnerability, which was not the case earlier. Earlier, if you were the leader of the organization, you had to sound very confident, you know it all, very decisive, lead from the front. But now, and especially now, the organizations, they are dealing more with the millennials and the Gen Zs. They are far more open to expressing their vulnerability, because that's also showing their authenticity. They are bringing their authentic self out and putting right in front, and that's actually bringing the organizations far more closely together.
So you're saying if there was a gap earlier, that gap is now starting to blur?
It's starting to blur because it's a change in the leadership style, and I wouldn't attribute only to men, men or women, but it is just a new trend where people are no longer afraid of showing their vulnerability.
Manoj, is there a difference in leadership style, you think, between men and women?
I think there is. Okay, and I started off my legal career, my first boss was a woman. And if I look back on it, I learned a lot from her. She eventually became my colleague, and that was, I guess I was pretty good, but also she was very good as well. And we became partners in the same law firm. But if I reflect back, I think Shefali is absolutely right. At that time, and I'm talking about 25 odd years ago, my boss, as a woman, I could see her having to try much, much harder to prove herself within an otherwise male-dominated environment. That sense of having to give up things in order to be able to be at the same table at that time. I think it's much, much more natural now. And I look at our own organization at India Global Forum. I'm proud to say over 50% of my colleagues are women, and 80% of our top leadership are women. And that's not because Manoj sat down and made this massive grand plan that this is the sort of ratio that I wanted. It's over the last few years, it's just been a natural progression to where we are. So in echoing Shefali's point, I think I can empathize with it, and I can see that it has become much, much more natural, much, much more easy, if I could say, to have women around the table and have those conversations and have them as leaders within organizations than it was a generation ago. It's normal.
And it's interesting you say that, because a country like India, for example, which quite often people say that, women are discriminated against, and of course they are in X number of areas. But it's interesting that in some areas, such as the glass ceiling, countries like India are actually more progressive than many others. And I'll just give you a small example and try and get you to answer that. A researcher had once come from a foreign university to me and was doing a research on, do women really have freedom and do they have gender equality in corporate boardrooms? And I felt that one of the reasons why India was advanced is when she was asking in many companies, including mine, who are the managing directors and who are the managing editors and how many of them are men and women, I could not give the number between men and women. And that in many ways I feel is real equality when a person is there as the boss and whether that person's a male or a female doesn't matter, it doesn't enter your head. Would you agree with that?
So
is that the ultimate equality?
I mean, that's what we should all be aiming for, but I don't think we are there yet. Okay. So Deloitte has published a report, which is Women in the Boardroom, and that has some interesting statistics. It does show, I mean, of course, in the Indian context, if you see, to the extent of mandatory requirement, most of the public companies have the women on board. But other than that, the voluntary, directors are very few yet. We are not there yet. Also, I think there is an Egon Zehnder report which talks about in order for women to be effective in the boardroom, you need at least 30% representation. So one woman in the board is not sufficient because then the woman is not able to openly voice out her opinion or ask the questions. You need a little critical mass. And this is what the Egon Zehnder report says, that you need at least 2 to 3 women for them to really function effectively on the board. But clearly, yes, I mean, if we stop discriminating or if we stop really isolating in our mind, how many men, how many women, then we've arrived. But I think we are still far from there yet.
Manoj, are we far from it, or do you think it is starting to happen that at least in some areas, some companies, when you're selecting people, you're not really counting whether you're not actually trying to really assess whether that person's a male or a female, and there's no quota system as such, but it's happening organically. So, are we at that stage yet or not?
No, we're not. And I recall a conversation last year at IGF here when we launched our WomenIN Forum, and Laura coincidentally asked me this question in terms of the purpose of the forum and what's your vision for the forum. And I said my vision is very simple, that within the next 3 to 5 years, or as soon as possible, I would like to collapse this forum. And that is when when it's irrelevant to have a specific women-focused conversations on platforms like this. There will be areas and certain subjects where it may be relevant to have a men-focused conversation or a women-focused conversation or a trans-focused conversation. But my vision is that these sorts of conversations we need to work towards collapsing them. And in order to do that, either there will be enlightened leadership that leads to a point that this is no longer an issue, or you've got to look at the statistics, look at the rules, regulations, and recruitment policies, and go in a very, very determined way to make it happen. So, and I think a lot of companies have to do that.
Well, coming back to your point about having a critical mass, it's interesting when it comes to looking up to a female boss or accepting female leadership. If you look at South Asia, for example, I mean, India, of course, has had a woman prime minister. Look at the number of political parties that are headed by women. But it's not just India. It's Bangladesh, it's Sri Lanka, it's Pakistan. Even Pakistan's had a woman prime minister at a time when America, for example, has never had a female president. How do you explain this sort of a dichotomy that while you may refuse to accept female leadership in some areas, you're perfectly happy giving your entire country to a woman to run and say, you'll do a better job than the rest of us.
I think that's interesting, right? And I think that's also the difference between how politics is managed versus how corporate world is managed. And if you see, even within Asia, it is not really consistent. So while, of course, we have some good examples in whether it is India, Bangladesh, if you see Japan, they are really far, far behind in having women leaders in the corporate world. So I think it is something to do with, what is the expectation, right? The conventional sense, the women in certain societies are still expected to be largely managing homes. Only when they have an alternate arrangement in place can they step out into the corporate world. Whereas in the Western side, that's no longer the case. I think, both men and women have to work. And then whoever gets to rise, they rise. But somehow in their politics, I think, while of course, they don't have the president, they have a vice president, they're still struggling with how to get the diversity right. But I think it's in Asia particularly, it is also more of just how, the conditioning of the families and how even not just men, how even women think about it.
I'd like to pick up on actually this point that you've made, is that one of the solutions, and people think that this is a magic wand, is work from home. That, if we work from home is the great liberator for women, and therefore they will be able to contribute more to the workplace. They will be able to balance their home life, their kids, and their work. It may be true in certain cases, but if you actually if you really want to affect societal change, work from home to look after domestic chores should equally apply to men as it does to women, is the first thing. Secondly, what I've noticed, and again, these are societal observations. In some societies, in some communities, women actually want to work from the office in order to get away from they're not getting away from the responsibility, but sometimes I've got to use my words very carefully, the burdens or the chores or whatever at home, which they're otherwise expected to do, or the other pressures that come along with this. And so we've got to actually affect societal change, where work from home is not a woman's solution for all women. It's a solution for society if used in the right way and embraced by both men and women themselves.
So coming back to some of the differences and in leadership style, there will be some differences. I mean, obviously, everyone should be sharing the chores, and that should not become a distinguishing factor. But there will be some areas, for example, where there will be differences, and perhaps we have to figure out a way of making sure that that is taken on board, embraced, and we accept it and move on with it. Take an obvious example, maternity leave, right? I mean, it's but natural that maternity leave will have to be a longer time period than paternity leave. You should have paternity leave, by the way. It's very important. I was one of the first people to insist in one of my organizations, I have to get the right to get paternity leave. Why shouldn't I? But the time is different, right? So are those the sort of changes that we shouldn't shy away from? We should take them on board, embrace them and saying, yes, this is the way it should be. And we have to find a way of evolving, getting leadership sorted around that. Yes, there'll be this gap, but then you'll carry on.
Well, look, you've got to take a principled position that, and my view has always been, is that we are all equal, but differentiated. There are physiological differences that we have to acknowledge. And there are certain things that I've learned now with my executive leadership that I know there are certain things I should not say. Okay, we heard in the earlier panel, darling, for one of them. But more fundamentally, I've learn't that to say to my willing colleagues, don't be so emotional. That is an absolute no-no, because it is so patronizing, and I've realized that actually there are different emotions sometimes at play, and those emotions are driven often by physiological reasons or their own circumstances, and therefore that can be there. But having said that, and again I'm qualifying it, I've also seen that true to be with some of my male colleagues as well. And so you've just got to judge each situation on its own and its own merit.
All right, so let me ask you that. Treat everybody absolutely equally, or accept that there are differences and embrace the differences?
I think accept that there are differences and embrace the differences. because both have their own strengths, and it's a package like anything else. But I would also say that in terms of just policies for the corporate world, we also need to be mindful that women as gender, they behave differently. So for example, you would have fewer women raise their hands for leadership roles as compared to men. And there is research which shows that men would take a leadership role even if they think that they are 70% there. But women will not do that unless they themselves are convinced that they can do the job 100% well. So, and very rarely, you really know whether you can do it or not unless somebody really nudges you into it and you give it a shot. So women need a little more of hand-holding and pulling up to say that, yes, you can go for it, you can do it. So what's more important, apart from the policies that facilitate and give the flexibility to work during certain periods, you also need that awareness and the policies that create that network of support group for the women. Because unless you build the pipeline, you will not see women on top. And it is very critical that you have a network which helps women stay on course and not just fall by the side when they're passing through certain critical phase or somebody's needs care at home. You need that support system which keeps them on the job, on track on their careers during that phase.
So you said embrace the differences, and I'm going to ask you, then I'm going to come back to Manoj on that. What would be some of the differences? What would be some of the things that you feel that therefore women do better or
so
better
for example, if you recognize,
better at multitasking, better at
women are definitely
not good
better.
At work?
Women definitely are better at multitasking, hands down. But I think one of the things that women need a little more support with is networking. Women, because they have other responsibilities, do not go out enough to network. If they have to network, they would rather do it. So, again, there has been research that if you have, say, dinner events, fewer women attend because they might want to, they prefer to be back at home with their children. But if you have more lunch events, they are more likely to be there. I've seen, even leaders in Deloitte network who've changed the leadership style. So rather than inviting their teams over for, the happy hours, they would rather just, invite the teams over on the weekends at home, for the backyard barbecues, where the team gets to meet their family as well. So to see the more human side of it. So I think there are differences, there are nuances. There is nothing right or wrong. We just have to be cognizant of it and we need to embrace it.
I think you're evoking some thoughts and my own consciousness about this. That if I look at, our work is all about convening and bringing very interesting people like in this room together, and that requires a significant amount of networking. And I do encourage all my colleagues to go out and network. But at the end of an evening, I say to my female colleagues, when you get home, text me. I don't say that to my male colleagues. Is that good, bad? Is that, I don't know. But, these are the sorts of things that maybe there is that vulnerability what Som spoke about earlier on, that means that, one just has to be conscious of when those networking moments happen and what one says. I'd be interested to see.
Actually, that's a really interesting question, and you can help us both in navigating that. Exactly the same question, like running an organization which has a very, very strong culture of saying no sexual harassment and complete equality. Interestingly, the only complaint that we ever got for discrimination or you're not being diverse was, why is it that you don't allow women to stay back and work, 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock, and then you're constantly harassing us and saying, how are you going home? And the answer was because you're worried about for your safety, right? It's Delhi and going back alone in an Uber at 11 o'clock is dangerous. They're saying, no, but you're not treating us equally.
Yeah, Vikram, the answer is, let it be the woman's choice.
Yeah.
Rather than, stereotyping, I'm sure that there are many women who are capable of taking care of their own security. Have arrangements in place so that, you're not taking it lightly, especially in more riskier countries or cities. So make arrangement, but let it be the woman's choice, whether she wants to work late or not.
Does that answer your question, Manoj?
I'd still ask them to WhatsApp me when they get home.
That's all right. I mean.
It's just...
Depends on where you are. You can't help but feeling them. Okay, let me just ask you a question that I think is worrying a lot of people. COVID, and in the period, there's a Deloitte study, for example, 10,000. The number of women who've left their jobs in the last few years. What's the reason for that? Is it burnout? Is it having to handle too many things? Is it a sense of we need different priorities in our life, which is also happening?
It's all together, right? I mean, Vikram, if you see, whether it's the Deloitte report or many other reports that came out, COVID was really a big game changer. It was like a big reset for everybody. Not just women, even men. There are many men who left their, then current vocations and they switched track to something different. So I think that, and it's good, from time to time to have those events which really gets us thinking, what is it that we really want to do? And how do we want to do it? How much time do we want to give to our jobs versus to our family, to our own well-being? And the Deloitte survey on women at work shows that there were more women who wanted to go back to office precisely for the reason that Manoj mentioned, that if they continue working from home, it's more work hours for them. Putting their home chores plus the office together. Whereas when they are out, and you're more tuned in to what you're doing. But I think in terms of mental health and well-being, this is something that has really risen to the top. And not just for women, even for men. Post-COVID, everybody's far more aware of it. So everybody wants to have far more, healthier life, spend time on their own, exercising, meditation, whatever they do, and not just, burn out early. So which is a good thing to do.
All right. My colleague, Dr. Ishita Mandarek, has written a fascinating article in Gulf News, I think it was last week, on breakthrough or burnout. And addressing specifically this issue for women. My only comment on that, when I read that entire article, is that it would equally apply to men as well. And post-COVID, we have become more conscious. I think that the COVID pause gave a lot of us a time to reflect upon what our priorities in life are and how we balance those things. I personally don't think of work as work, which is a good thing and perhaps a bad thing as well. So.
All right, I think we are flat out of time, but perhaps if I could just ask you one word each, right? If there was one leadership skill or leadership style that you would like to imbibe from your female colleagues or female boss like Dina, for example, what would that be?
Empathy.
Okay, empathy.
Empathy.
No, what would you like to imbibe from any of the male colleagues or male leaders?
Empathy. It's not only women's, territory.
Okay.
But it is a good leadership style.
That's interesting. So both want to imbibe empathy. So that's obviously a common feature that is looked up to. Thank you both so much for being with us. Let me find. There's Laura. So Laura, let me hand it back to you. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, a fascinating session there on who's the boss. Thank you so much for that fantastic insight there. Empathy from both of our guests there as well was the key message, of course. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we now have a very special guest here at the WomenIN Forum to tell us about his journey from film to philanthropy. Our next guest is a well-known award-winning Indian actor. However, beyond his iconic Bollywood career, our next guest is a philanthropist and champion for social justice for women, and is also the youngest and only Bollywood actor to make the Forbes Asian Heroes of Philanthropy list. And he's here with us today, ladies and gentlemen. So please put your hands together for Vivek Oberoi, founder and chair of the Oberoi Family Office. A very warm welcome.
How are you, Laura?
Very well. Wonderful to have you here.
Great, absolutely.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be in the WomenIN Forum. Right, before we get started into your sort of philanthropic work and your sort of dedication to different sort of women's, charity groups and things like that, I wanted to talk about how you got into the movie business. How did you get into Bollywood? And also, how even is the playing field when it comes to men and women in Bollywood? We heard earlier from Sanya, but I'd like to get your take on that as well.
Well, I'll answer that as a two-part question. I think I was 7 or 8 years old when I discovered I wanted to be an actor. And I remember when I was about 11, my dad told me that it's great to desire, but it's good to deserve. So I started working towards it. I started doing plays, and I started realizing I was good at it. And then came time to, I finished my master's at film in NYU, got back, and Dad said, come on, it's time to launch you. Like, it's a typical tradition in Bollywood that the second generation gets launched. So it's a big movie being set up, and I don't know why, I had a crisis of conscience. And I told my dad that I don't want to do it. And he's like, no, but we've got this phenomenal director signed, we're writing the script, and we're going to produce this. I was like, no. I said, I'm going to do this on my own merit. He was like, but how? You'll have to struggle, and I built a platform so you wouldn't have to. But I was pretty clear that I wanted to do that on my own and test my own mettle and test myself whether I deserve that opportunity or not. And I dropped my last name and set out for 18 months of personalized humiliation, rejections, being told, because in India, the one thing that we get a lot, and absolutely free is advice. So a lot of people will tell you can never make it, and you should think of something else, and you can never be an actor, and this is what an actor should look like, or this is what an actor should be like. Then I had my own little Arya stock list, where I was like, all these people are in my little notebook, and I'm going to be in a position that they come to me at one point and ask me to sign me for their movies. So that kept me motivated. And thousands of rejections later, I finally got an opportunity. I heard that there was a film being made called Company. Ram Gopal Verma wanted to cast. I somehow figured a meeting, and he said, no, you're too polished. So I need a guy from the slums. I need a rough guy. So I walked out of his office. I didn't accept no for an answer. I went and lived for 3 weeks in a slum. Wow. Taught me a lot more things than just acting, that experience. Wow. And then transformed myself into the character because I knew I was never getting an audition. So transformed myself into the character and randomly knocked at his office door. Somehow they let me in, dressed up as this ruffian, with a beanie in my mouth, and walked in and had the meeting with him in the attitude and the language of the character. And that was it. There was no audition required. He signed me then and there for a princely sum of 10 rupees. And that's how I got my first film. The second part of your question, is it an equal playing field? I think it's better than it was. If you look at decades-wise Bollywood, you had for every decade maybe 1 or 2 substance movies for women. Otherwise, they were mostly, glamorous props. They were always a hero-driven industry with male characters dominating. But as you see the growth of Bollywood, the consciousness of diversity and women empowerment, you're seeing that the working conditions, you're seeing the fees that women take home, you're seeing all of that growing exponentially in terms of empowerment. You see a lot more content being made that's female-centric and women-driven. In my own little way, I try wherever I am either part producer or I have the influence, small little things. I think small steps make a big difference. Perception makes a big difference. So every time I'm doing some project, I try to put the female lead's name above mine, try to break that male hierarchy story. I've done that successfully in a number of movies, and I think it's a good small gesture, but it's a good way to walk.
Yeah, really nice. That's very, very polite. Right, I was reading you rehabilitated 3,000 families and donated about 3 million of your own money, and you've helped raise 25 million, this is US dollars, to charitable organizations. So you mentioned, this experience in the slums. Was that the first sort of time, your eyes were open to this, when you experienced it yourself? And what sort of drew you into your philanthropic work?
So I think in my growing up years, my parents, especially my mom, was very conscientious. She's a natural philanthropist. She spent 35 years working with really underprivileged people dealing with terminally ill diseases, because they barely get any attention, they barely get anybody coming and just asking how they're feeling, right? So she did that in her own way, like a counselor, pretty much self-taught, small gestures. But I saw her do it with great commitment and consistency. And that inspired us. And there was a small tradition that she started in our family that every birthday, every celebration, we'd also go to an orphanage and we'd celebrate with them. And we continue that tradition even today. And we celebrate with them. And there's a certain sense of value, sharing, empathy that starts to grow innately. And I have my mother to thank for that, because to me, she's my hero. Every time I'm doing something, I think, would my mom be proud? A little bit of a mama's boy, yes, but it's a great barometer to go by. I think when the tsunami happened,
yes.
I was taken by surprise, because I remember coming back late night for one of those Christmas parties and flicking on the TV mindlessly to see what's going on before I go to bed. And then I see this devastation, and it shocked me. And I live right by the ocean in Mumbai, in Juhu. And I just thought to myself that, what if this was happening to me and my family? Would I be okay with people just going to bed and saying, oh, that's so sad, turning off the TV and life is going back to normal? And that kept me awake all night. I waited till my parents woke up, had a quick tea conversation with them and said, I'm going to take a few days off. And they're saying, where are you going? And I said, I'm going to go to Chennai and I want to do something about the tsunami. What are you going to do? I don't know. I got to do something. I can't just sit back at home. I have to be there. Oh, but there's so much that they're handling. You're going to be, more of a nightmare for them because you're going there. And, I said, no, I'll figure it out, but I have to go there. So I flew down to Chennai, got a sense of the situation and realized I don't have an organization that's going to go and fix this problem, but I want to contribute. I got a list of things from the district collector that they require: relief supplies, simple things, clothes, blankets, basic medication, clean water, things like that. And started making a few calls. Called Coca-Cola, I was their ambassador. They sent me truckloads of drinking water. I called Apollo, they were friends. They sent me medication. They committed medication. But all of this still had to be taken and distributed, and there was no bandwidth for the government. They were dealing with so much at the time. So then I realized I need volunteers, walked into college. A whole bunch of people came in to take pictures and autographs and stuff like that. And I said, everyone will get whatever they want, but this is what I want to ask you. I've come here to help our people from your state. Are you willing to contribute? Are you willing to participate? And that's where Project Hope was created. And I suddenly had an army of about 1,500 kids that messaged each other, social network at its best, really doing something positively social. And before I knew it, from the 3 trucks that I had committed of supplies, by the next morning we had 15 truckloads.
Wow. And
decided to go there ourselves to Devanampatnam village. Went there, saw firsthand what was going on. There were still people stuck under the rubble when I got there. It was 72 hours after the tsunami had occurred. And we didn't have any place to stay. There was no infrastructure. There was nothing. So all of us figured out. We pitched tents. The Indian Armed Forces, as always, exceptional organization, helped us, lent us some of their tents. Stayed on the beach. Little things. What are you going to drink? What are you going to eat? Where are you going to use the bathroom? All of these things, we were physically experiencing the same thing, but without the loss that the families that lived there, once called it home, were experiencing. It was razed to the ground. And that led to Project Hope, created the first lateral project of its kind, where I said there's no hierarchy, nobody owns this project, nobody reports to anybody, but everybody has to contribute, almost like a blockchain, where everybody has responsibilities, you can take them on, you can pick and choose your responsibilities, everybody executes them in tandem, in sync. That was a big success story. Post the relief work, decided to stay back, couldn't leave. Met this beautiful old lady who had lost her son and her grandson. Found her son dead, and then she found her grandson's body washed ashore 2 days later. And she was just broken. And I don't know what happened, but she hugged me, she held me and cried, and I just couldn't go back home. I stayed back for the next 9 months and built the first, potentially the first smart village of India. We brought fish finding technologies for the farmer, for the fisher folk. We brought education for the kids. We built a primary healthcare center. We built 1,800 plus homes for the families, and we got them to get back to work. And it was the first village in India post the tsunami that had the boats back out in the ocean fishing, while most other places they were playing politics that, oh, the government's going to pay us this, and we're going to get reparations, and let's wait. But it was a great experience, and one of the most fulfilling experiences of my life. And the core mantra to success there, I think, was the fact that it was all spearheaded by women. So we took the women, elder women, the ammas, and created the council of elders with them, and then brought the younger girls to shadow them, kind of like your British parliamentarian system, but also learn from them. And it was an exceptional experience. It still runs today on autopilot. I'm not a signatory, I'm not a trustee, nowhere. I'm just the chief Anna.
Isn't that incredible? What an amazing story. And even going back to sort of the first bit where you were talking about your mother, what an amazing woman to, instill that into you from a very young age. And that obviously has, transpired throughout the rest of your life. And it's always been something that's always been there,
I'm a father of 2 kids, but I truly believe that we are what our mothers make us.
And it's good to be a mama's boy, by the way. I have a son, so he's my yeah. Hopefully, he's a mama's boy. But speaking of these women again, that you sort of like gathered together, and they make sure that this sort of village runs like clockwork. What sort of skills did you see sort of come about when when there was an emergency situation and these women sort of organized everything? What was the sort of added strength that you saw within that?
I think women in general, and specifically Indian women, especially from a lower economic strata, are experts in crisis management because they're dealing with them every single day, every single week, every single month of their lives. And it was incredible to see them to come together with no egos, no issues. They knew their children were hungry. Community kitchens had to work. They left their pain, their agony, they put it aside. They helped cathartically, gave each other catharsis, holding each other, but working at the same time, feeding the kids. The men thought it was wiser to, drink away whatever money they had left, because they were justified in the loss and devastation, so they just decided to drink. But the women really pitched in and contributed, and they were there 24/7, ready to work hard, work as a unit. And that's what transformed it. And that's why I'm a great believer in women, and I'm a great believer in what women can do overall for humanity.
Very nicely said. We have a couple of minutes. I'd love to throw to our audience. I'd love to get some, hopefully 2 questions, but I think we've only got time for 1, so we'll see. Who has the first question for us? Any audience members? We have a microphone just coming round there. Do we have any further questions? Yes, we have a lovely lady in the front here who I think is on my next panel. Right, yes, just the lady at the front, please. Tell us who you are and where you're from and your question, please.
Hi. So I'm Reem Bakash. I'm the Deputy Managing Director of the World Government Summit Organization. My question, I've just walked into the session, so I got a good few minutes of what you just said. My question would actually be around economizing philanthropy. For me, philanthropy has been seen across the globe in very different ways. And there's one element, I can just give a quick example of, giving $10 and that's it. But there's other ways of doing it where you're actually creating that ecosystem. How hard it is for you to, actually create that ecosystem? What are the struggles that, you've had to kind of overcome in order to actually have that conversation? It's not easy, but I'd love to know your thoughts on it.
I couldn't agree with you more. Having been actively in philanthropic activities for the last 20 years, there's a fatigue both in terms of asking for money, giving money. Even if you're performing, there's a fatigue, there's a sense of fatigue. No matter how much you tried CSR, how to corporatize it, there's always a shift. Like when COVID happened, there was a shift, and a lot of the other regular donors moved out of what they were donating for and started reallocating towards COVID and said, we have only that much money. So what that made me realize is instead of just raising capital for OPEX or corpus building, to try and work on social impact for-profit initiatives because they're infinitely scalable. So Oberoi Family Office, my own family office, does exactly that. We invest ourselves and we raise capital. We give co-investing opportunities to people to create opportunities which have measurable social impact but are also extremely profitable. And the portfolio has been performing exceptionally. So it's been a great start. I think a little bit of economic sense, making sure that the impact trickles down to the bottommost denominator, and maybe a lot of blessings.
Thank you so much. Fantastic question. Sadly, we have run out of time, and I've been told we do have to wrap up, but it's been such a pleasure to hear about your journey from film all the way through to philanthropy. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for Vivek Oberoi there. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Quick photograph. Thank you so much. Brilliant conversations continue here at the WomenIN Forum. Right, ladies and gentlemen, what many companies do not realize is that if they do not act now, they risk losing not only their current women leaders, but also the next generation. So understanding and engaging the next generation of talent is now our focus here at the WomenIN Forum. And who better to discuss this than our next set of guests? And I'm very pleased to say we also have a male voice in the conversation today. So please welcome our panel. First up, we have Marketa Simkova, Partner, Head of People Performance and Culture at KPMG UAE. A very warm welcome. Thank you for joining us. Thank you. Do take a seat. Next up, we have Reem Bagash, Deputy Managing Director of the World Government Summit Organization UAE. A very warm welcome. Thank you for your question earlier as well. That was great. And now rounding out our panel, please give a very warm welcome to Vijay Subramaniam, Founder and CEO of Collective Artists Network, India. A very warm welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. What a brilliantly diverse panel this is. It's brilliant. We've got three really unique voices for this, which is so important. I wanted to start off with an insight into the next generation and the different demands that we're dealing with, because that next generation is completely different to our generation. I'm hoping we're all the same generation anyway. But yeah, they're very, very different, you see. And so I just wanted to know what each of your sort of take is on that when it comes to those demands, and especially with women as well. So maybe a full roundup as well as women specific. Yeah, please do go ahead.
Right. So I do get involved in recruitment quite often, and I interview young people coming to KPMG, and I do see that the demands they have are very different from what our generation used to have. I mean, we all talk about the fact that they want flexibility and they want a work-life balance, and that's absolutely the case. And they are actually not ashamed to ask for it, and even once they actually join our firm, they would not mind actually saying no. Sometimes they would ask them, can you please do this, but they would just, no, sorry, I finished this time, I need to go to the gym, I need to do my thing, and they are not ashamed to say. Secondly, they actually do look for purpose in the work that they do. So actually already during the interview stage, they would kind of actively comment on, for example, the research they have done about our firm, and they are really pleased in the fact that we are involved in environment and social activities, and they say, actually, this is a good selling point for me. I am joining KPMG because I'm interested in this. And they also want to know, once they do their work, how it will contribute to the purpose that KPMG has, how they will contribute to the society. So they want to know what role they will play and how they will contribute. And another thing I've noticed, they are very digitally savvy, so much more than I am. And they want to have everything digital. They want to have everything on their mobile, great user experience, simplicity, all of these things. So, yeah, I mean, the other generations, they ask about the title, the money, but it's different with the young generations.
Interesting that, you know, this generation, they have a voice. They're not scared of anything. They're not scared to ask for anything, which is great as well at the same time, you know, because, you know, it's all about empowerment and things like that. Reem, what are you noticing about the next generation, especially when it comes to women?
I think just building off, you know, what my colleague has said, but I think one of the concepts are the notions of range. Primarily, we used to want to focus on one thing. I'd go through a certain schooling life, graduate, and I'd know what job I'm getting. That's completely different for the next generation. There's a lot of unknowns. And for those unknowns, they're willing to build range. And that range is try a million different things and not be scared to even take their time learning those things. And I think that causes that a little bit of friction where they don't mind spending that time to understand what that purpose is and why am I even doing this? And should I be doing it in the first place? So I think another element which is really coming up is the notion of range, and that I'm willing to learn different things, and I'm willing, you know, and I don't see this as a setback. The older, you know, if we look back a couple of years, you know, you'd feel like if you took one more year in university or something like that, you were late.
Yeah.
That concept doesn't really exist at this point. It's what have I done? What did I do? What am I going to do? And I think that it's more about opportunities rather than being in that fixed trajectory, which, you know, the older generations, if I were to put it, were typically bred in.
Which completely changes the whole sort of employment and talent landscape in itself, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So interesting. Moving on over to Vijay, your take, please, because I know you run an artist management company. You've got some incredible people under your belt as well. So it would be very, very interesting to hear from your perspective as well what you're noticing.
I think it's a very tough question. It's one that rolls around in our halls the most. The best way I'd like to describe it is I think there has to be a balance on the trifecta of, I think, purpose, empathy, and balance. Right? I think that's what these guys look at. I think at least in my realm of media and entertainment, which is a fairly fast-paced, fast-growing industry, I think the average young talent today coming into the workforce, I don't think the usual perils of the usual validations and gratifications to when we join the workforce. For example, when I entered the workforce, I think they hold the same kind of water. I think you have to have a bare level of empathy, although that's a very, very intangible value and that's difficult to codify it. But I think for me, the way we work towards that is we actually try and understand how to build in the value of empathy into their daily work, right? Because I think gone are the days where today with social media being so prevalent and being so pervasive through all their lives, I feel you just need to marry opportunity with the right culture as well in most of these cases. And I think it's rather gender agnostic. I don't think, for me, the young workforce is actually male, female from these perimeters. I think purpose is very important. Because of their access to information, I just feel that they ask a lot of the why as opposed to the how and the what. I think the what is what gets them to the job. The how is what they'll end up doing. But I think you have to keep I find the necessity of re-emphasizing the why over and over again. What part of my job is creating impact? It's interesting because, you know, talking to the average 23, 24-year-old today, is so much more challenging than talking to when we were 23, 24, because, you know, it was pretty straitjacketed in terms of what we need to do. Go work really hard. You had your usual channels of escalations if things weren't working out that well. But I think today with social media, with just generic availability of information, you have to find that balance of nurturing them. It's very tough. I think as you scale, organizations will find it more and more difficult. But I think that's something that you need to retain core with this young force that's coming in. And I strongly believe that's gender agnostic.
I mean, it seemed in our sort of generation, the companies were in control. We were all scrambling to get into these big corporations, whereas now it's on the flip side. So this generation are in control, and it's like, well, if you want me, you're going to have to sort of, you know, cater to my demands, basically. A recent study found out that more women left their jobs in the past year than in 2020 and in 2021 combined due to burnout and lack of flexibility. which is, I thought that was quite shocking, actually. I mean, this past year, people are burnt out, they're leaving, that's it, sort of thing. What do companies need to consider when it comes to attracting and retaining female talent in particular? And I'm presuming it's the flexibility, but I'd like your take on that, if possible, Marketa.
So actually we went through this as well, and I would say we went through it a little bit earlier. So already in 2021 we had very high female attrition. We always comparing to the overall attrition, and it was about 3 percentage points higher, so it was very worrying for us. So already last year we did a lot to kind of focus and tackle that. And so the first thing that we did is focusing on equal opportunities for women. And of course, we had policies that guaranteed that already, but it was more about how we communicate it. How do we let the women know that actually, that's the case, that there is no glass ceiling, that they have equal opportunities. Also creating more of an inclusive culture. We launched female mentorship program to make sure that our females have someone to look after them and help them navigate the career at KPMG. We launched a networking platform for them. It's called No KPMG Network of Women, where every quarter they can meet with business leaders from the industry, but also from within KPMG, and network, create these connections that will help them to navigate through their career. Of course, we had flexible policies already. We have complete flexibility from where one works. It can be from home, it can be from the office, but we gave more flexibility in terms of the timing as well. And so all of this combined, we actually did see quite radical drop in the female attrition, so it seemed to pay off.
Reem, I wanted to talk a little bit about the WGS released a Women in Government Leadership report earlier this year. So I wanted to talk about the next generation within leadership positions, because women globally, as found by this report, are considerably underrepresented at all levels of decision-making worldwide. So how do we nurture this next generation? And is there, a big percentage of young women that want to sort of get into leadership, that leadership space?
So I definitely think the dynamics are changing, and I do believe that there are a lot more women who are being. One thing I always say is that you need somebody to look up to, and the dynamics. When I mean the dynamics are changing, I actually have people who I can look up to who are women who've actually achieved things. So. There are a lot of Emirati women who've made a lot of magnitudinal stances when it comes to decision making. And that actually helps. It's very important to have a puller. There's the concept of I've had a lovely conversation earlier with Vijay today, and the idea is I can officially now go to him and talk to him about anything after our 20-minute conversation, and I know that if I need help or I need advice on something, he'll help me and he'll pull me. You need to have women who are actually there as role models to follow. And I think until we don't solve that issue, we're not going to actually be able to solve, the whole dynamics won't change as rapidly as we want to. I also believe that the dynamics in terms of women representation, you said across all boards, there is a discrepancy when it comes to what some of us can actually do and what some of us want to do. And I think that's very important to understand. I could want to be, the next, billionaire, but I could also be the person who wants to have a very philanthropic NGO. Understanding those wants, and this is not also gender-based, this goes, and primarily I believe for women, finding out what they want sometimes takes a little bit longer because we want to, get the best of all worlds. And I just want to go back to your point where you said why, the layover, the retention rate of, women leaving. I actually think it's a collective burnout from COVID. And I also think, when you have that patience period and then it finally, the bubble bursts. And partially because they experienced flexibility, which was in many cases suddenly taken away from them. And I think that's something we need to also think about, why it was, during COVID, it didn't happen because flexibility was actually given. It was not a choice for us. It was actually just there.
And flexibility is important for women, though, in the workplace. Obviously, if you are juggling family and things like that, and I know it's different for men, but I mean, at the moment, that's what women need. If you have a family and you've got other responsibilities, then yeah, flexibility is key. Vijay, tell us a little bit more about the Collective Artists Network and the sort of dynamic you have under your umbrella and the differences between male and female talent. Is it quite an open playing field, and is it balanced? Or is there a lot of men under your books?
I would like to say yes, but I think media and entertainment as a whole is having a tectonic shift in its consumption cycles. Right? If you see what's happening world over, I think the concept of what you consume from a media and entertainment lens has changed quite considerably post-COVID. You've had a significant impact in global box office where actually it's more the big is becoming bigger. I think the middle is becoming smaller, and the small is kind of disappearing. Right? That's literally what's happening. If you see globally everything that's done well, and even back home in India, it's only the big pieces of content that have really moved forward. I do feel that the ratios and the skews are still more on the male side in terms of how your classic theatrical box office revenues world over are distributed. You will still find them heavier on titles that have been capped off by males vis-a-vis females. I think there are fewer and far between examples of that being the inverse. But having said that, I do believe it's getting a lot better. I know that there's been a lot of discussion on pay parity between actors and actresses and how that's worked across globally. But I think that's also a direct product of commerce, right? It also depends, it has to get validated by the consumer who's buying it, right? And there's data to kind of back this vis-a-vis not. But I feel, especially from a collective standpoint, what are we trying to build? We're just basically trying to build a marketplace for creators, right? That's exactly what we're doing. So, in fact, at home, we are empowering more women creators and diverse creators. And by diverse creators, I'm talking LGBTQ, I'm talking women, I'm talking women in deep parts of India where internet is just about penetrating at scale in the last 4 to 5 years. And we're talking about getting them into the light by having a vocation by actually creating content, right? So I feel that I feel technology is disrupting a lot of media and entertainment in India. I feel we are the hottest streaming market currently. So what we do is we're trying to democratize talent, gender agnostic talent, and figure out how is it that we can give them the best in class opportunities to express themselves via making content.
Very nicely put. We've got 10 minutes. I wanted to give our audience 5 minutes, though, of audience Q&A. So I wanted to draw on both of your experiences, just as women in general, sort of what you've learned on your journey and some of the opportunities and challenges that you've both faced, just as women and the sort of environment here and things like that. Well, what sort of helped you along the way? And is there anything that sort of held you back? Marketa, why don't you start?
Right. So actually, I think what influenced me a lot. I grew up in communist Czechoslovakia, and there are not too many good things about communism, but the one good thing is that there was extreme gender equity between males and females. As in, we were brought up in an environment where women could do anything. We had female miners, we had female in construction, female, forklift operators, like literally women could do anything. And I was brought up with that mindset. My father always said, yeah, you will be the ambassador for Czech Republic. And again, so yeah, that's what I will be. So I never had this notion that because I'm female, there should be any discrimination, or I shouldn't, raise my hand for any opportunities, or I shouldn't ask for a promotion. That was never a thing for me. And I feel like sometimes women, if they are brought up in this environment where it's actually emphasized because you are female, you might face some challenges, and it actually makes them more afraid, and maybe sometimes they are shy to ask for promotion or shy to ask for stretch opportunities, and then it would impact them in their career. So I actually feel really blessed that my parents, my father was so supportive, and that even the environment was very, very equal. and that's how I am, you know. I don't believe that things should be any better.
And that's probably why you've done so well, you see, because there's always been an even playing field in your family, and the opportunities have been there, so you sort of believed in yourself, right? So that gives you the perfect platform to success, I suppose. Reem, your experience, what's helped you along your way?
I think I'll go back to what I said earlier, which is actually having role models to look up to, because if somebody else has achieved it, it helps, you know, like you said, the belief system of it's actually doable. And, you know, the dynamics also have changed where, you know, over the past couple of years, I think I was in university 10 years ago. I shouldn't be saying this. Now you can do the math of my age. But the idea is education is key, and having self-purpose. And sometimes in environments, you either have people, and this is not, again, you don't need to always have role models who are females, for me to be completely clear. It's having role models who actually believe in what you're doing and pull you up, and that is critical at every stage, whether it's in government, whether it's in, you know, in the private sector. Having people actually believe in the younger generation is also very important, and making sure they're heard. So I think those opportunities and, you know, facilitating those, and I believe I was blessed to have those opportunities. And I hope I reciprocate that also across my team also moving forward.
So it's taking that experience, exactly, and then putting it across
into action, basically, because there needs to be that lifelong learning concept. If you learn something good, take it and also adapt to it. So that's basically what we need to be doing.
Vijay, back over to you just before we hand on over to our audience. Please do get some good audience questions going in the last 5 minutes. Right, Vijay, how do we enhance the visibility of women then and their contribution, and how do we nurture talent from within different companies as well? That's very important to nurture within, right?
So I think I'll take my qualification of building human brands to answer that question, because that's what I do for a living. Coming back to what Reem just mentioned, I feel the use cases of marketability of talent in senior positions with women has to go up significantly, right? I feel today when you open the newspaper, when you read news, when you see all the big things that are happening in technology, startups, etc., I feel the illustrations of what women are doing to break the barrier. If you actually were just to take a sample set and slice and dice, you know, the top 5 things that happened in tech, the top 5 things that happened in consumer, the top 5 things that happened hypothetically in not-for-profit, I think you'll find that representation there in reportage is not as significant. So I feel, going back to her case, and this is what I do at my company, is I highlight a lot of achievements which are egalitarian, right, which are not gender bias. I feel one step, and I mean, my strong belief, and I have a daughter and a son, so my strong belief is one step towards ensuring the right representation is in your head to calibrate it equally, right? And I think if every leader does that, I think you will have a better conversation on this. This may not be such a hot topic of discussion going, decades on from now. So one of the things that I believe that we don't do well is we don't represent, or we don't market, or we don't what we usually call brand real achievers when it comes to women, right? I think if you do a slice and dice, your ratio could be as significant as 7:3. Right? And I think when that ratio starts changing around a little bit, when I as a CEO start highlighting it more, not because I have to, because that's what ticks the box of inclusion, but I have to because that's the actual reality on the ground, I think that's where you're really building up a unique conversation. So I think if every company, like you said, you have, at KPMG, you guys have various practices, but how are these practices coming to light? One thing is to have a KPI, one thing is to have a process, the other thing is actually to market that process and to actually show results. I'm somebody who understands how do you sell the can and then leave it to the consumer to figure out what's inside the can. I think the can has to look a lot prettier, right? And I think just the overall communication around this has to become a lot stronger by illustrating use cases a lot harder.
All about taking action, isn't it? Right, we hand on over to our audience now. Do we have any questions? Yes, we have a lady in the back there. Please do tell us who you are and which company you are from, please.
Thank you so much. My name is Divyata Rajaram, and I'm the director of a creative consulting company called Idea Tree. Thank you so much. That was absolutely brilliant, all three of you, and of course our moderator. But I've been listening intently, and I'm really fascinated, mostly Reem, because having lived in the UAE for over 25 years now, we've seen a sea change in terms of, like you said, of course, a lot more, not just women in the workforce, but, being Indian myself, I know that very often it's social norms, it's cultural norms. There are all sorts of intangible elements that a culture speaks to each one of us that inhibits us from really realizing our full potential. So my question to you is really about when it comes to Emirati women in the workforce and what we're seeing now, and we're seeing some incredibly not just competent, but absolute role models, as you said, of leadership in our government today. I know we're on the brink of COP28, and with leaders like Shama Al-Mazrui, yourself, I think you truly stand testament to everything we've been saying today. And I would love to understand from you a little more about how do you feel education and the future generation, because I'm hoping it's not something that will end with just a few women and a bit of tokenism and a few panels. But the idea, I think, for all of us and what we want to take back is that this is an entire cultural shift, a shift of mindset, a shift of opportunity in every realm. And a conversation, hopefully, as Vijay said, that we will not need to be having on gender a few years from now, a few months from now, hopefully. So what would you say about that?
So, first of all, thank you for the question. I think I will answer the latter part first. I go back to what Vijay said. I think when in terms of Emirati, the UAE, and the UAE, one primary thing we need to look at is fairness and do you deserve to be in the room, regardless of gender. And I think what has helped a lot is through the education system now, everyone has equal opportunities. And it really depends on how invested and how curious am I in order to achieve, and then you earn your seat at the table. And I think, perfectly how Vijay put it, that, you need to, it's not about, and I hope we don't have this conversation in a couple of years, it's not about who you are, what gender you are, why you need to fix, based on cultural norms. It's, do you deserve to be in the room or not? Are you adding the right value? Are you creating the right ecosystem? Do you have the ideas to put yourself in, somebody else's shoes in the next 5-10 years? Have you got a role model to actually work towards? So when it comes to putting this all together, and in terms of, I think the Emirati story, if you were to put it, it's all about how do I achieve that goal? Do I have the tools and mechanisms to do it? And from the primary age of, from the school right up to the hustle of the university, right up to internship opportunities. Over the past, I would say, 20 years, it's completely, and honestly, education was, for Emiratis from day one, has always been an equal opportunity. In terms of work, that's where it was, there was differences of whether I want to start a family, whether I want to work. That's changing obviously now, but primarily education is key. It's what puts you one step ahead, and that lifelong learning concept, you need to have that embedded in you across the board. I hope I answered your question.
Great question there as well. Any further comments? Because we're going to have to wrap up soon, but would you like to jump on the back of that at all? Any further comments? No?
I think here in the UAE, it's also the government. The government is really championing the women in the workplace. They, for example, launched this Gender Balance Council a couple of years ago, where even the private sector can sign up to propelling women to leadership. That's something that we have done as a firm. And yeah, I just really feel that the leadership here supports this cause.
A fascinating conversation on navigating the future workforce. We cannot thank you enough for coming in to the India Global Forum. Let's hear it for our panel there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Quick photograph and we will move on. few more sessions to go, ladies and gentlemen, here at the WomenIN Forum. And we have a really fantastic guest coming up for you right now. Well, our next guest, ladies and gentlemen, is a well-known, award-winning journalist and was previously managing editor of WomenIN News Channel and hosted India's only international primetime news show, Gravitas. Our next guest loves a good debate and has interviewed a huge range of political and well-known global industry figures throughout her time. She is now the managing editor of Network 18 Media and has her own show, Vantage, with Pallavi Sharda, to share the challenges and triumphs that have shaped her career, as well as the passion and the purpose of her storytelling. I'm now delighted to welcome on stage, please give a very warm welcome to Pallavi Sharda, managing editor of Network 18 Media. How are you? Thank you so much for joining us. This is very exciting you're here. Yes, please do take a seat. How does it feel to be in the other seat, answering the questions this time?
Well, I will be more sympathetic to my guests henceforth. Let's just say that.
Brilliant. Right, I wanted to start off with a tweet that I read online from you. And it says, "I hope I live to see the time where the world doesn't need a Women's Day to recognize the place of women in society, and that empowerment doesn't come from marketing drives, fancy quotes, and cupcakes." Can you elaborate? I agree, by the way, but please do elaborate for us.
I will. Let me also first start by thanking Manoj and IGF for having me here and for us to be able to have a conversation like this. And I totally sort of stand by what I wrote, that cupcakes will not bring empowerment.
Definitely.
For empowerment, you need to be acknowledged for what you bring to the table, which women often don't. You need freedom of choice. And freedom to express your opinion. You need financial independence. You need to be in control of your life. And I think being rewarded and being appreciated for what you contribute to this world, not just in terms of words, but I think in our world increasingly financially as well, is very, very important.
And that's something we're going to touch on a bit later on, because I know financial independence for you is a big passion sort of topic. As a very successful woman in journalism, sort of what challenges have you had along the way as a woman in journalism? Has it been quite an easy road for you?
I think the challenges for women are near universal, and they are industry agnostic. For journalists, the time that we spend doing our work the hours are longer, it's more demanding physically and mentally, and you find yourself in situations which are not always friendly. So yes, it can seem more daunting from the outside, but I think any woman who manages both home and work feels those pressures. Having said that, in newsrooms still are a man's world. I know there are a lot of women presenters, but the people who are making the calls are more men than women. And I think I was lucky to have had some good mentors and bosses along the way. But I wouldn't say that it's easy for anyone, for people in my team. And whatever I learned in my 2 odd decades, I make sure that the challenges I face are not the same ones that my team faces. I'm sure they have their own set of things to worry about. But I think what we need is more women leaders to be able to appreciate what women in the workforce anywhere go through.
And so, I mean, you've become, managing editor. You are managing editor of 2 networks now. So how has that sort of journey been as a woman? Have you had to fight your way to the top, or has it been quite a nice, supportive atmosphere in both networks?
This is not so much about the networks, it's about the industry that we operate in, I think. And this was famously said by someone else. I love to borrow the quote that women are judged on their performance and men are judged on their potential. So you always have to prove both to your bosses and to your teams that you're deserving of the seat that you have. And it's that much harder for any woman leader anywhere. So no, it's not easy. And sometimes you have to go against your basic nature and push for your case. Because I think a lot of women still still believe that someone somewhere will recognize how talented they are and reward them, and it doesn't happen. And over the past few years, when I became a manager, when I started hiring people, I saw that, and I'm not saying it's a bad quality, but men were very forthright in asking for what they think they deserved and negotiating better for their salaries and for their designations. Women were more, they did not want to upset anyone. And I think that's how a lot of girls are raised. We need to change that, and we need to tell them that it's okay to ask for what you think.
I've heard that in so many industries, not necessarily just media, but yeah, we're always, we don't want to offend anyone, we're peacekeepers, and we never strive because it looks like we're being arrogant if we want something else, Yeah. But in actual fact, if you're doing exactly the same job, why shouldn't you? Exactly, if you have the same skill set. Let's go back to your journalism. What drives the passion and purpose in your storytelling? How did you get into the field of journalism?
I always say that journalism chose me. I was studying to do something else. I wanted to be a designer, but I somehow found myself writing for a local newspaper, and one thing led to the other, and then I was in a bigger newsroom. It was quite fascinating, so I stayed and did what I was doing. But I think I chose journalism after I took a break, and I did, because I don't know how much of Indian news or television news you guys have consumed, but it became a very, very crowded place, and the kind of storytelling that I wanted to do was not what I was doing, or so I thought. So I did take a break, but when I came back, I knew that I wanted to tell news stories, like stories that are palatable and accessible to people of a wide range. I also wanted to tell the India story. We are a country of 140 crore people. We have 400 news channels in India, but we did not have a global voice, as it were. So we wanted to tell our own story to the world and not depend on someone else to do that. And in my own small way, that's what I tried to do. We still have a long way to go, but I guess we've made a start.
You've done incredibly well so far, my goodness. So what about some of the big interviews? Can you share with us any of the big interviews or breaking news stories that have been memorable in your career that you've really enjoyed, or you were proud to be a part of that moment? There have been so many. Sorry, it's quite a difficult question.
There have been so many. I think the big interviews, one of them I did in Dubai, that was Pervez Musharraf. He was the former president of Pakistan and the army chief. I think that was quite an interesting interview. I wouldn't say one story is more exciting than the other, because we tell the stories that excite us anyway. But of late, so last month I was in Israel just after the conflict began. The year before I was in Ukraine to see what was happening. And when you're there on the ground and you talk to people, then you get a perspective that you do not get while you're sitting in your studio. And you realize that it's so easy for us to sit every night and say, this is the death toll and this is what has happened and these are the trends. But when you've been there, then you see how it touches lives, and it can be very moving, and it shapes you as an individual. All of those things. So
being on the ground, I can imagine, is very, very different. Because we're just getting numbers, and you sort of become in tune to what you're sort of watching. And being on the ground and actually seeing suffering like that must be very, very different.
And sometimes you see a trend that is building. I think Me Too was one such movement of sorts that was supported a lot by the media. We did not have any ground reports, as it were, but there was, or the big anti-corruption movement that we had in India. When you're part of those events, then you see history shaping in front of your very eyes, and you feel that there has to be a bigger purpose to what you're doing than just telling the news. I mean, you're actually shaping your story and that of your country or your people.
You're making history at the end of the day,
Or you're chronicling it.
Chronicling your history, exactly. Let's go back to financial independence. So I was reading a staggering 62% of women, of Indian women, don't have a bank account. And you've been quoted as saying that financial independence or financial well-being is the key to women empowerment. So what does women empowerment mean to you, and why is that so important when it comes to financial independence?
So I think 62 you said?
62%,
I thought 80% of Indian women have bank accounts, but it's not as much as men, obviously, and it's better than the global average for India.
Oh, is that right? Is it better than the global average?
Yes.
Is it? Oh gosh, I didn't know that.
But I think in India, or I don't know about other societies, but women have a way of saving which is not documented in formal structures. So we are the biggest consumers of gold, and that is a form of security for women, and they stash away some money. But that money is just there. It's not investment. It's just a saving for a rainy day, and it's their understanding of security. I think even for women who have jobs and who are earning their own money are not managing it. I have a friend who runs a podcast on financial advice, and she told me that a lot of middle-aged women in India are now being struck with 2 Ds, that is debt and divorce. And then when they're on their own with a big debt, they do not know, they've never managed their finances. And so she's telling them to take charge of, and it can't be so difficult. And I think financial literacy is a life skill that should be taught in schools to everyone, but especially to women, because we need to know what we're doing with what we have. So I think financial independence is very important, and we need to I guess, it's not on anyone's priority list, not that I know of. So.
Oh, it's not. Is it still something that's just sort of left behind?
Yeah.
Because as you said, there's financial independence, but then as you said, there's financial literacy, which is completely different, I suppose. So it's instilling that at a very early age, isn't it?
Yes.
Other than financial independence, what else do you think is needed for sort of women empowerment when it comes to being more independent and becoming more, independence, I suppose?
I think it would help to have more women leaders because they can inspire others. I think in schools and colleges, women tend to do better academically, at least in India they do, than boys. But then somewhere along the way they drop out of the workforce because their career cycle and their biological cycles clash, and a lot of them choose their family or whatever it is that they're doing, and that's their choice. But I'm saying that we don't have a pipeline of leaders to draw from then after a certain point. So we need that. We also need networks that support women to pick a career of their choice. There are all boys clubs. There aren't such clubs or groups for women that enable them to make the choices that they want and grow. And they typically do not get the kind of investment. There was a very interesting study that was done, I think it was in the US, where the same investment pitch was made in a man's voice and the same one was made in a woman's voice, and the one with the man's voice got more takers. So I think these are inbuilt biases, and it won't change overnight. And what we need to do then is to co-opt men and women in this journey of transformation, because we cannot change biology, but we can certainly transform our society and what it expects of us.
That's what we were talking about in one of the previous panels, actually, is like, do you think there should be blind pitching when it comes to entrepreneurship and trying to raise money? And as you said, a male voice got all the interest. So, I mean, obviously, it's a sad moment in time where you've got to do blind sort of pitching and things. But yeah, it's very interesting that the male voice got that through, though. Really interesting. What sort of education and policy needs to be further developed in order to sort of help promote more financial literacy from the bottom up, sort of within the education system? Do you think a lot more needs to be done? And what sort of active role would you like to see government sort of play to change the playing field?
Education policy, I'm not sure I'm the best person to talk about how it should change. Like I said, financial literacy should be introduced, but I was part of some conversations around G20 on women empowerment, and we had women leaders from various countries, all G20 members in India a couple of months back, and ministers. And one of the interesting things that came out was STEM education, that more girls need to be encouraged to take up science, technology, engineering, and math, because the job market is going to change and it'll be more technology oriented. But I don't know if it's because of biases, I don't know if it's because women think or girls think that they will do better in humanities, which is okay if that's what they want to study. But there has to be an active intervention to encourage girls to pick up those subjects. STEM education is the way forward for them to be able to become more eligible for the kind of jobs that we'll have in the near future.
The future of jobs, because I did an interview with I think it was the one of the chiefs of L'Oreal, and she was saying, more and more women and girls are going into STEM education, but a lot of them fall short after they sort of graduate and they get their degrees and they do quite well at it. They either fall short from sort of family pressures, you see, and so they can never extend their careers. So it's how to sort of balance that going through and past sort of higher education and actually putting it into practice as well is like apparently a very big thing as well.
And some of this data is very, very disheartening, like the gender pay gap, for instance. The best agencies in the world say that it's going to take 136 years or 140 years to close that gap, which tells us how slow our progress is. A couple of years back, I remember there was a study that came out that said that women who do unpaid work or work at home, if that were to be quantified and paid for, it would be some $11 trillion. And if those women were to make a country, they would have the third highest GDP in the world.
My goodness.
So they are contributing. Wow. And if you were to add it to the contribution that is converted into money, then women would be contributing much higher to the global GDP. So I think that there needs to be more awareness to what women are bringing to society. And they need to be compensated for that.
100%. Yeah. Very well said. Very quickly, what would you say? I want to talk about who your role model is in a minute. But first of all, anyone that's sort of in our audience here today, or anyone watching online, of course, you've got a big online audience. What sort of words of advice do you have for sort of younger women that are looking to get into journalism that maybe you'd wished that you'd known before getting into this field?
I wished I'd known before getting into this field.
How would you have navigated it better, do you think? If that's possible, of course.
I don't know. You need to make the best case for yourself. You have to market yourself. No one else is going to do that for you, I think that. But my first advice to anybody would be to read and to educate yourself, because that's what is going to stand you in good stead, no matter what you do. And it's very important because, especially as journalists, we struggle with timelines. We are always faced with a stiff deadline, and we have to deliver. So it helps if you have some basic understanding of a subject, and you can't do it overnight. It's a process that takes years, and there is no shortcut to it. So you have to do it, and it can be daunting in the beginning. But eventually, you're better off for it, and you like what you've done, the kind of work that you've put in. So I think it's very important to do your own reading, to research, to arm yourself with knowledge, because then you know that you cannot be shortchanged.
And journalism is not for the faint-hearted, is it?
It is not. It is not. It can be... you ask the junior-most reporters on the field, they're sent on they're usually given education or crime. That's where you start as reporters. And crime reporting can be tough because you're thrown into all sorts of situations. You see all kinds of scenes which can be blood-curdling. And initially, some of those stories stay with you for very long. Slowly, you become more cynical and you learn to process it, and you know that you don't have to become very emotionally attached. The first time I went into a refugee's house, it stayed with me for months. And then I had to learn to tell myself that I'm not part of that story. I can only tell the story, but I do not have to go and find a school for those kids. Yeah. That's not what I'm here for. So I think it takes time to become more rational about the subjects that you're dealing with. And they're not easy. I mean, you learn every day. And sometimes it's upsetting because when you're talking about stories like hunger, they're not as exciting as war. So you see people switching off mentally or physically. And that's not nice because you're telling about the hardships that a huge section of our population is going through. So I think the challenge is to make it more interesting and palatable and exciting. All stories are not like that, but that's what we do.
And at the same time, growing a very thick skin at the same time, exactly. And making sure that obviously you're not a part of the story, you're telling the story, as you said, yeah. Very quickly, we've got 1 second to go, but I really want to know who your sort of inspiration is. Who do you look up to? And it's very important, as we were saying across this forum, that it's very important to have a role model and a mentor. So who is that for you?
For me, I think it's my mother. She got married at a very early age. She gave herself an education. She was studying and taking a formal degree till I was in high school. And she was doing it with everything else. And she was a teacher, she was raising us, and she was studying herself. And she's taught us to be true to our values and just take a shot and see where it takes you. So I think it takes a lot of grit. And I see, and her story is not unique, but that's I think what inspires me, and I hope that I can leave that behind for my own daughter. So I think she's always inspired me that way, and she's had a very positive approach to life, which is hard to emulate.
Really nice. We cannot thank you enough for making time for us here at the India Global Forum 2023. Ladies and gentlemen, Pallavi Sharda, thank you. Photograph, and then we will move on. Oops. Thank you so much. Really wonderful to have you here. Thank you so much. Right, ladies and gentlemen, next up here at the WomenIN Forum, I'm going to be handing back over to Vikram, who will be sitting down with an actor and entrepreneur to talk about leadership and creativity. So handing back over to Vikram. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Laura. And great pleasure to invite onto the stage Sunil Shetty. Somebody we've watched so many times on screen, admired him so many times on screen, but who's now inspiring us in a completely different direction because, many people have one successful innings. You've had more than one successful innings, many successful innings actually. And in particular, I would like to talk to you a little bit today about what you're doing with entrepreneurs, what you're doing with entrepreneurship, what you're doing with startups, what you're also doing as a lesson for people that if you have fame and success and celebrityhood, how you can actually leverage that in another area, because you've probably done that more successfully than just about anybody else I can think of.
First of all, a very, very good evening. I don't know, really, but yeah, it's been a great journey, and that is because, it's a completely different world out there now. And even though I've seen the highs and lows as far as acting goes, I haven't had a very good last few years. But then there were a lot of other opportunities, and I believe that if you did encourage these youngsters, the very startups that are looking so brilliant today, it would be good for me, and that's exactly what happened. I was fortunate enough, actually.
I'm going to turn to entrepreneurship and startups and even sport in just a couple of minutes. But let's just go back to your journey, right? Talk us through it a little bit in your own words. From the very beginning, your first memory.
Whoa. I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur because I always saw Dad working long hours, but happy hours, successful hours, also giving us all the time in the world. So that's one thing I was very clear about, is that I want to do a particular business. I was very enamored by Dad with what he did in the restaurant business, and I said, that's the industry I want to go into. So I think as soon as I graduated, got out of the 10th grade, because then you had 10 plus 2 and plus 3. I started helping Dad with his restaurants because he was also not keeping, his health wasn't very good. So I started helping him in that journey. Through that, did my education, then went on to do HAFT, Hotel Administration and Food Technology, WomenIN Sydenham, WomenIN HR. And then at the same time, because I was a clothes horse, ended up having my own fashion brand called Mischief, which was very, very successful, and a big brand then. So I dabbled in multiple businesses very early in my life, and I saw success. And I think that's what, that's the urge for doing so much more now. Got an opportunity because of my martial arts background. I was training with Sensei Pervez Mistry and doing a show on stage, and a producer friend of mine saw me and saw me do action. And there was this transition period that was happening in the film industry. We were moving from cinema to the DVD world, the video world. So there was this turmoil, and they were looking for new actors because we were talking about mass cinema, and he saw the action that I did and gave me my first break there. And after that, it's been cinema. A lot that I dabbled in from a business perspective, but wasn't successful at all then. And now in the last few years, when I was weaning myself off cinema, is when I started dabbling with startups, and that kind of worked for me.
So the interesting thing of that story is that it actually began with the entrepreneurship and then moved into films.
Absolutely. It was martial arts. The only thing that I was good at, when it came from a cinema perspective, because I wasn't educated in the world of media or cinema. When I entered, I got a chance, and I grabbed that opportunity with both hands.
But looking at those early years, you may have had a very successful brand, and of course all the work you were doing in restaurant business. But was cinema the ultimate high? Being able to, till today, of course, you can't walk anywhere without people stopping you and posing, asking you. There weren't selfies at that time, but presumably asking you for autographs. Was that, at the end of the day, the most satisfying thing?
I guess. I say I guess because, the love, the affection that you receive, it cannot be compared. And success there brings about a whole lot of change in people around you. They look at you differently, and if you've got your head on your shoulders and you do the right thing, behave in the right way, there's so much that it gives you that I won't deny that. I'd say definitely that's the biggest high, because the love, the affection that you receive.
Was the environment, though, very different in those days? You're talking about a particular time when cinema itself did go through a lot of ups and downs. There were upheavals, there were problems, there were stories of pressures, there were, commercial pressures. Was that a good time, though, overall?
It was a good time because it let me settle. If it wasn't for the changing times and the coming in of video, I doubt actors like Akshay, myself would even ever get a chance, because the ones who are established, we're facing the same problem now with the coming in of the OTT. So we did get a break then, but it was different because the underworld was ruling then, so we had a lot of pressure from the underworld to do films. The minute you got successful, you had one film, and you wanted to do something better, there was pressure from the underworld to do something. So you had to end up doing cinema that you didn't want to do, and which you couldn't explain to the rest of the world. As to someone says, you're doing a good film now, and then suddenly, why this film? What do I tell? Who do I...
Well, that's what I was sort of trying to allude to in an indirect manner. So that pressure was that era. Absolutely. You had to do films that you don't like. Absolutely. Otherwise you would get calls. And
Absolutely. Calls and threatening calls, and, they do something somewhere and set fear in you. So this was a constant thing. I think early 90s, all the way up to 1998, 99, this happened, and it happened regularly. So every year or every 2 years, we had to end up doing a film that we didn't want to.
in addition to the underworld issues, the creativity at that time, when you see some of the creativity that you're seeing right now, it seems to be really, really, really good. It's not that there weren't creative good movies then earlier. Were there any particular commercial pressures in addition to the underworld that were playing?
Yes, being an action star, they wouldn't let you do anything else. If I wanted to dabble with comedy, they'd say, "Nahi sir, ye chalega nahi." The distributors call the shots more than the producers. So the minute a film was announced, you had distributors from various states telling you what kind of film they expect. So if it was Sunil Shetty, it was all about brawn, it was all about body, it was all about how many action sequences there should be, what kind of music that they expect. And generally distributors came in with the money, saw a bit of the cinema. If they liked it, they'd pick it up there and then. That's when sale happened. And if they liked it but thought something was missing, they would ask you to add on an action sequence. And when you say, where do you add that on? It doesn't fit in here. They say, nahi, yaar, kisi bhi tarah kar lo. So to close sales.
Sequence in a dream sequence if you have to, but just put it in.
Absolutely. And that's what happened. Dream songs, dream sequences when it came to action, and we did it.
But you have done different films also, so how did you manage to get them?
I guess after seeing, once you establish yourself to a certain extent, you do get the opportunity to choose what you want to and do the kind of films that you want to do. But I also saw a lot of failure, earlier when I dabbled with comedy. And I started dabbling with comedy because every time mom, my wife, my daughter who was really young, came back from watching one of my films, and I asked them, what did you think of the film? They said, brilliant, absolutely loved it. But then at the same time, they would ask for a Saradon, which said that it was, which always told them that it was a very heavy film. And that started getting to me. I said, do I need to do something different? And that's when I dabbled with comedy. But
you're really good at comedy. I mean, I'm sure you had a lot of people telling you, I'm sure. That
but that's much later. You've got to attempt it. You've got to do it. But they'd refuse to buy it. So when it's lying in your own backyard, it's very difficult. And it's only when the Hera Fairies and the other films that I did came along, I got this opportunity. But I got this opportunity because there were other actors also. So commercially, it was a safer film to do. So it was always the commercial safety that ruled over content also. I mean, I'm seeing that happening even today in its own way.
So when you look at the industry right now, and then I'm going to shift to entrepreneurship a little bit. When you look at the industry right now, the film industry, obviously we are seeing the power of OTT and the sort of different type of content that is now being created, which must be almost making you salivate and saying, look at this sort of stuff and the sort of opportunities there are out there right now. Is it a very different world now?
It's a completely different world. Of course, great because a lot more talent getting opportunities, kids across the country being OTT stars. But somewhere down the line, I believe that it is also impacting cinema, because cinema still stays commercial. Tier 2, Tier 3, Tier 4 cities are the ones that are dominating, and that's why we're seeing the impact on the big screen, that you don't have your numbers coming. At the same time, OTT is not growing, subscription is not growing. So we are at a stage where we don't really know what is the way forward and what we need to choose, because when you talk subscriptions, the subscriptions aren't increasing. OTT platforms are shutting. And so, we are at a stage again as to, should we continue with commercial cinema? Should we do smart cinema? If you're doing good cinema when it comes to content and you're focusing on the content, you don't see box office success. If there's no song, there's no dance. And the proof is, the results in the last few months or years.
People were writing off the Indian film industry until this year. You suddenly had a number of blockbusters. So,
Right.
It seems to have almost revived faith to some extent.
Absolutely, and that's why content will always be king. And the audience, the end user, is someone who's going to be of prime importance. And we're forgetting that it's not just the metros; it's the small towns that are making the impact. And that's why, if you see regional cinema, it's growing so very fast. Somewhere down the line, I actually believe that we in Hindi cinema have got lost between wanting to make films. Are we making films for subsidies, or are we making films to make money? We're stuck in that. A lot of them are saying we want to do content that appeals to India, but unfortunately we're looking for subsidies in the UK, in all other places that are offering subsidies. So where do we stand is the question I've been asking constantly.
We are here in the UAE, so is the international market becoming more important than ever before? A decent chunk of the revenue now comes from the foreign.
Absolutely, it does from the overseas market. But the success of the film, it's important that the success begins at home. It's only then that wave carries. And a successful film, it's the word of mouth. Always that makes a difference. Achhi picture hai yaar, achhi picture hai. That's what matters, and that's why you see even regional cinema and language is no barrier. That's thanks to OTT, of course, that reach.
Okay, let's shift to entrepreneurship right now. And at least a couple of the startups that you've been associated with are an extension of the story you were talking about, right? So if it's a fitter or something like that, you've always had that action man, image, and you're a great brand ambassador for that. The restaurants are an extension of what you said you began with and what your father was doing. Was that a conscious decision that this is part of what I've done till now, so I have comfort here?
No, actually I went through a period where every film of mine was failing at the box office, and I realized that it was only because somewhere down the line I wasn't focusing on the content. I have the love, I have the affection throughout the country, wherever I travel, hell of a lot of love, but why isn't it converting into box office success? Which means I was going wrong. So I took a step back and said, you know what, I need to take a break. At the same time, Dad got a paralytic attack. He was in bed, couldn't move, and just his right hand moving, couldn't speak. And I got the feeling he wanted me to stay home and not work. And that's exactly what I did. More so because every time I went to work would extend. I would get upset that I wanted to get back home, and it wasn't allowing me to spend enough time with him. So I said, you know what, let me take a break. It's when he passed away after 3 or 4 years, which means my gap was nearly 6-7 years, is when I got an offer to do a reality show. And at the same time, not having anything to do, I put together a show which was more a show for startups. I was working with a television network and did this show called Horses Stable that gave an opportunity, working very closely with Niti Aayog, Atal Incubation Mission, and the startups they gave, and provide a platform for VCs to invest with them. So we were the bridge between these two, and that's where I saw a few good startups, and approached them to give me an opportunity to probably invest with them. And that's where the journey started. After which, my first was a success and sold at great numbers. After that, I've had a lot of startups coming to me and, organically wanting me to be a part of it.
And what's the sort of symbiotic relationship? Because they're obviously not coming, they are coming to you presumably for the money, but they're coming to you for a lot more than the money. They're coming to you for guidance, mentorship, perhaps also your role as a brand ambassador.
Absolutely.
What do you hear from them?
Absolutely. I think sometimes it's about mentorship, them believing that I know the subject as well as they do. Sometimes it's about funding and finance, and otherwise it's brand ambassadorship. And most of the time, I stay away from being a brand ambassador because I know it all depends on your highs and lows and how you do. So I'd say rather than take money from you, can I reinvest that that in your business, if I believe in that business. And that's exactly what I've been doing.
So the sort of money they would give you to be brand ambassador, you say, don't give me cash.
Absolutely.
Give me shares in your company instead.
Absolutely.
So I'm invested in the success
Absolutely.
of that company.
Yeah. If I believe in it, yes, for sure. And I'm in the domain that I'm comfortable with, something that is a part of me. It could be health, could be fashion, it could be media, it could be sport. And it's worked pretty well.
What part of that do you enjoy the most? The advice, the guidance, seeing the success, the returns that you're making?
I think the excitement of seeing something new grow, does it solve a problem? That I think that's exciting. See these youngsters deliver and deliver big, something that you could only dream of. And when you don't have a team, it's a good way to move forward. And I see everybody in my industry today invest with great startups because that's an opportunity. As an actor, it was only real estate that we invested in.
Well, big actors did make investments earlier and tried to get into businesses, but sometimes they were only film related and some of them didn't do well. You're right, there's a lot more success that now seems to be happening with startups. You just saw Alia did with one of her investments and others also. Why do you think that's happening? Is it because it's a sort of a diversified portfolio? It's not only in films or reinvesting the money in films?
Yes, absolutely. And the numbers are much larger today, so the kids need to invest, right? There are great agencies that are earlier they were managers and now they're agencies. So the agencies are looking for so many more opportunities for us and, come with those opportunities. So in both ways, it's being managed beautifully. And when your portfolio can grow and when an actor decides that he wants to do only 1 or 2 films a year, I've completed over 130 films. I don't think this generation can do that in 130 years because they choose to do less, which is a great thing. So they're living their life, enjoying what they're doing, at the same time growing their businesses.
All right. Well, I'm afraid before we end, I have to turn to, a somewhat painful subject, which is the World Cup final. Now, of course, you're Rahul's father-in-law. It must have been how was that entire experience going through you? You must have thought, and I'm sure he felt also, that this time we're going to win it.
It's brilliant. Let me tell you, yes, we lost the cup. That was one bad day. But the fact is that I was Sunil Shetty till yesterday. I'm Rahul's father-in-law now, and that's a feather in my cap. For me, I never use the word father-in-law. I always call him my son because I don't know the father-in-law relationship. But I'm sure each one of us here have felt that. I felt that for sure because it's a part of the family. The love, the affection that this team or sportsmen in future will receive after what they, played the way they have, is unseen. I've never seen this kind of affection. I've never seen this kind of love, this kind of respect. In spite of us losing, I think we Indians now have learned to respect individuals, respect sportsmen, and everything that they do for the country. So hats off. I'm glad. I wouldn't say I'm glad that we lost, but I'm glad that something new, a new respect and a new love for sportsmen and sportsmen have come around. Rahul was just telling me he was coming back from the airport, and right from the time he got out when he was on flight till the time he got into a car, everybody was just clapping for him. And this was after losing. Whereas earlier we'd hear someone's house being burned, someone being abused,
stones being thrown at people.
Absolutely, in spite of us living in a world that is scary when it comes to social media and trolling.
It's interesting you say that. So Rahul actually feels that there is more love and more affection and more passion for sport now than there has been in the last few years?
After this World Cup, for sure. 45 straight days, 10 straight wins, playing like champions. You have a bad day. You have a bad day, and whatever the reasons being, they did their best. The boys did their best, and you see Rohit leading like a champion, playing like a team. He didn't play. He could have scored another 200-300s if he wanted to, but he chose to give India that start so that the boys followed, and that's exactly what they did.
So do you see India becoming a sporting nation?
Absolutely.
Olympics coming soon?
We've seen that with the Asian Games. You know, we won medals in so many sports. And what more can we ask for?
All right, so cinema, startups, being known as Rahul's father-in-law.
Rahul's father-in-law.
What next for Sunil Shetty?
I always say a step back. I took a step back because my films weren't working. Probably a successful film at the box office with Sunil Shetty carrying it on his shoulder, not anybody else. So, you wait for that day and work hard. I continue to work. I continue to strive, keeping myself fit and ready for any such job that comes by.
Can I put that to the vote? How many people in this audience would like him to do that film?
It's so sweet. Thank you.
Not putting their hands up. All right, look, we are out of time completely, but Manoj, with your permission, can I maybe take a couple of questions?
Sure.
All right, anybody have a question? Yeah, the lady there, if you can just get her the mic.
Hello, sir.
Hi.
It was brilliant listening to you and really, really, really empowering words. My name is Purvi Roy. I'm CEO and founder of a company, startup in India. And you are a brilliant actor, and then you invested in startups. Entrepreneurship is the new journey, or the journey you have been through. So I want to understand what, according to you, innovation and leadership or innovation and entrepreneurship is, or innovation in entrepreneurship, and how do you see India's potential as an innovation or innovative country?
Huge. But I always believe that innovation, tech and the human touch together is very, very important, and we have that here. We have the people, we have the tech, it's just a perfect combination. And that's why I still feel this is the beginning of that growth period in India. And with the infrastructure developing the way it is, when you travel the length and breadth of the country, nations have been great nations because of the infrastructure that has been there for years with them, and we have it now. So I think it's the perfect time, for young entrepreneurs and startups. In this journey of mine, the one thing that I've seen is, through the show also, that we have brilliant ideas. We've got a lot of investors, great money. It's that management part of it. These startups are excited about their ideas, they know their product brilliantly. It's that bridging of that management that is very, very important. And that's why I feel, young, bright minds need to probably take risks and take on equity and become a part of the journey of some of these companies, because then it'll be complete.
All right, I'm going to be greedy and maybe get one more question. Manoj, okay. Lady there, yeah. And then one question here, and then I promise to wrap. Yeah, the lady there.
And I'm glad that ladies are asking me the question, because I never had a ladies audience when I used to do my films. It was always action. Women never reacted to. No, I know, box office.
What makes you think the women won't watch your action scenes?
No, I don't know. I don't know why I got that feeling, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure they were.
Hi, good evening. Great listening to you. My name is Durga Das. I play cricket nationally in India.
Oh, wow, congratulations.
And I captained the US team for many years.
Wow.
Yes. I've been an entrepreneur since I was 14, and I'm currently running a company that makes water from air. And I think both are kind of aligned to what you do. But my question to you was this. Do you think sports people become better entrepreneurs simply because of discipline, perseverance, the ability to win and lose?
Yeah, but later on in life, once you're done with your game, probably after that, because otherwise the focus, the discipline required is unbelievable when it comes to sport. When it comes to cinema, we have so much more. We have so many more people involved in that journey of filmmaking, but when it concerns an athlete or a sportsman, your day begins when the rest of the world is sleeping. and it only ends when you're dog tired. And then success, game after game, being able to achieve the rest of the world, technology, other aspects in the rest of the world competing, especially when you talk about India, it's not the infrastructure that we lack, but the appreciation for all sports. I've realized in India, till you don't win a medal or you're not a hero, people don't encourage that sport. So I believe, because of discipline, because everything is to do with discipline. Once you're disciplined in life, that is freedom for me. You're free to achieve what you want because you know this is how I'm going to work, and that's what business even needs. So I think post their prime and post sport, it happens. Otherwise, you're seeing a lot of sportsmen who've also lost everything in their life, internationally. With the kind of monies they made in sports, but they have never been good entrepreneurs.
What actually has been the international experience on this? Both entrepreneurship, people in cinema and sports and others becoming entrepreneurs, being successful.
See, wealth management was always a problem for most athletes. Even in America, you see a lot of the kids going bust because they were never managed right. Luckily, now in India, a lot of management companies, we need a lot more who'd at least manage your wealth right. And that's why I always say after your prime. And especially for actors today, I mean, Vivek is here and he'll vouch for that other than real estate, there's so much for us to look forward to. So we are constantly, wherever I'm traveling, I see anybody young, great idea, a great mind, and you say, fine, I'll back you, let's try and do something, So it is a great period.
So Vivek's smile becoming wider and wider as you were talking about managing your money well. Yeah. No? Okay. That gentleman had a okay, last question, then we are done for time. The gentleman there had a question. Yeah.
Hello. So you mentioned about, you for 6 years you were with your father, and he died. And looking back, you may be very happy that you could look after your father. Maybe compromising your professional entrepreneurship.
No, I didn't compromise. Let me correct myself here. My films weren't working. And I didn't want to do anything that I wasn't going to be happy with. I said, I have this brand, I have a certain respect in this industry, let me keep that intact. I was doing a little work, but then it disturbed me when I couldn't go on time and give him time. So that's when I spent those 4 years, and I actually believe those were the 4 most beautiful years of my life.
That means, you could be with your father, so it makes you happy all the time.
Absolutely.
So you still, another thing, you still do the workouts?
Oh yeah. I mean,
can't you see
no liposuction, or no steroids, no Botox, no nothing. 63 and running strong.
Amazing. Thank you.
And if you don't believe him, he'll challenge you to a bunch of push-ups right now, or anybody else here. All right, I think we should really end out there. Although that gentleman has had his hand up for a while, so I'm going to give him one last question, and then I promise I will end it. Not that anyone's really complaining, frankly, so I don't know why I'm apologizing.
Good evening, sir. Myself, Abhishek. I'm a European youth delegate trying to represent Europe at India at European Parliament. Firstly, I'm a big fan of Ahan, sir. So it's a proud...
So sweet. So I'm Ahan's father too.
That's the thing. So I just want to know what one piece of advice you have given him, because I'm a huge fan of him. And secondly, what is one advice you would like to give youth like me to represent India or to work in a versatile way like how you are doing?
See, when it comes to Ahan, I've always tell him honesty is something that is required in anything and everything that you do. Whether it's your own profession, whether it's your relationships, whether it's your own children, you've got to be honest with whatever you do. And because, according to me, telling children doesn't mean too much. But doing what you do and them watching you do what you do is what matters, because they're watching you and they're growing. So it's my behavior that is going to impact Ahan, and that's exactly how I see it. I probably, when it comes to Ahan, the one thing that they say about Ahan is, what a disciplined boy. And that's something that has been there with us right from the days that I first saw Dad, and his sense of discipline and the way he lived his life, making sure that he had time for everything, whether it's his own business, whether it's his family, whether it's his own health. In spite of everything, he kept that discipline and honesty.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Sunil Shetty.
Thank you. But I need to say, Manoj, I need to say one thing today. I've never been so nervous. I was nervous today. I don't know why, but is it you? I think it's you.
What did I do? It was never going to be the big fight.
But thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Laura. Big picture.
Laura, do you want to come on this side?
Come. Thank you so much. That was great.
Welcome to India Global Forum, uniting the world's most visionary minds from India and beyond to shape the future. Hear from and engage with the most influential policymakers, business leaders, and technology disruptors. Welcome to India Global Forum, uniting the world's most visionary minds from India and beyond to shape the future. Hear from and engage with the most influential policymakers, business leaders, and technology disruptors. Get involved with our key initiatives and join us at our world-class flagship events in the UK, the UAE and India. Join India Global Forum, a gateway to the limitless potential of India's growth story and a catalyst for global connection. Log on to www.indiaglobalforum.com and join the conversation.
Can a bank help the world realize its dreams? At Emirates NBD, we empower people, companies, economies, countries. Proudly born in the UAE, leading the region, expanding globally. Investing, innovating, delivering, giving back, paying forward, creating opportunities to prosper. Emirates NBD.
From here, possibilities are everywhere. From taking first steps here, to beginning your own wealth journey here. From backing global trade ambitions here, to delivering on that promise here. That's why we're here, in the world's most dynamic markets. A bank that connects potential to possibilities. So, where will you go from here?